Oh, I already clicked it. Alright. Let's make sure we've got video here. And audio and all that. I guess I can't check audio on this TV. Alright. It looks like I'm live. Hello, everybody. Hello. In public. Oh, yeah. Let me go ahead and make this tweet. Bam. And that will reveal my live stream. Yep, everything looks correct. Cool. People are going to be trickling in from the just finished premiere. Probably some people who caught it late are still watching it and haven't gotten to the ending yet. So I'm not going to spoil it. I'm not going to tell you about the ending of the 420 plus anime videos, recommendations video. You know, if you're, hey Anonymous, I know you were there for it. All right. This is a Patreon rant request stream. People on my Patreon have given me $5 every month, and they get a rant request every month. They send it to me through the DMs. I tell them whether or not the rant is something I can do, and then I do all the rants in a stream at the end of every month. I'm going to keep doing that for the foreseeable future. So, you know, it's a fun way for me to make some quick money. Monko Destroyer was the latest request that I got. And they asked, the title of one of your latest videos called Anime is Degenerate. Shouldn't the word degenerate be added to the word you don't say, considering it has strong connotations with the persecution of artists accused by Nazis of producing degenerated art? Rant. Well, I don't know how many people know that, because I certainly didn't. I've never heard that. Anime is degenerate is kind of like a catchphrase on the internet. Maybe it came from 4chan. I could see that being something they did intentionally as like a Nazi meme, and then people are just saying it like me who don't realize. But yeah, I mean, like, degeneracy is like a general complaint people have about new media, about people like me who exist, trans people, stuff like that. Everything I do is called degenerate. And I've always just kind of embraced it and been like, yeah, fuck, whatever. I don't care if you think it's degenerate or not. But I also think it's important to have some awareness of the fact that, like, when you do degenerate things, you literally degenerate. Like, you become worse. And, you know, you might disagree in certain ways about what things will make you worse or better, you know, with the general consensus of, like, the society around you. But usually conventional wisdom is better than just making shit up. And a lot of anime and the arts really is just people, like, giving into the wildest ideas they have. And, like, some of them are trying to use that to do something kind of responsible, or at the very least, like, with an awareness of what it could mean for the audience. And then a lot of people are just, like, letting it all out. And, you know, sometimes they're just creating more themselves, which they might not have really intended to do. I know I didn't. All right. That's all for that rant. Also, if anybody wants a rant during this stream, if you submit a $5 super chat, I'll rant about whatever you want. I think I have one super chat from a previous stream. No, from a premiere that I said I would get back to at some point. So I'll also include that. So next comment from Lux. It says, for this month, would you rant about your fiction writing? Like, what inspired you to write everything you've written so far, and where would you like to take it in the future? Glad to be asked questions like this, because fiction writing is one of my favorite things to do. And one of the things I'm most proud of myself for. You know, writing about fiction, someone else has already done most of the legwork. I'm just kind of identifying what they did and recontextualizing it for other people. I see it as, like, digestive. And you could say that that's also what creating art is. Like, it is, like, you know, a confluence of your influences. But the more that you can make it, you know, the more opaque it is, the harder it is to tell exactly what you're ripping off. I feel like the more fun. So, I started writing fiction when I was a kid. I started with, like, fanfics and stuff. And then for, like, most of my teens, I was trying to write a novel, but I would usually only get, like, a page or two in And really it was like just kind of a way to unload emotions in my state of mind, and then I didn't really know where to go with it. And so finally, when I was like 19, I planned out a full novel series, and I wrote the first one for National Novel Writing Month. That November, I hit the word count, but I didn't actually complete the book. There were like a couple of sections that I left out. I eventually did an audiobook of that called Tales from the End of the World. I don't know where it could be found online currently, if anywhere. But I became afraid of writing fiction after that because I didn't think it was good. There were a lot of the problems I had with it. Honestly, if I had read more like shitty light novels, or even more of the light novels that like anime I love are based off of that aren't that well written, I probably wouldn't have been so self-conscious about it. But I think part of it was that it was like too revealing of like, it like made me look at like the psychological hangups I was kind of addressing in the story and be like, why am I writing stories about things like this? And then after a few years of doing, anime reviews, people were always asking me if I would write my own like light novel or anime. So, I wrote this light novel in like a day. It sucks and I hate it, but if it gets an anime adaptation, I'll say it was a work of genius, which was an experiment to try to write a light novel in 1 day, which is really more like 3 or 4 days, but it was like 24 hours. It was mostly a joke on Ero Manga Sensei and the fact that the main character writes a light novel in a day in the show. And people had a really positive response to that. So that reinvigorated me towards the idea that I could write fiction. So I started writing lots more stories. And again, most of them I only have like a few chapters and I haven't completed. The only ones that have seen publication have been like Kusomega books 1 and 2. I'm still writing book 3. I've still been making progress on it. I still want to release it. I still have all the materials to format the Kusomega books 1 and 2 physical edition that I was planning to make like years ago. Still want that to come out. But I've got tons of other novels that I've also just been bouncing between working on in the interim. I don't really want to talk about any of them because that makes them less likely to get completed. But yeah, for me, it really is like a matter of when inspiration strikes, I tend to write a whole lot very fast. So I'll write like a third of a book in a sitting and then not anything else for like 6 months or a year, or in the case of some of them, several years. And usually if like my feelings towards the story die off, or like I reread it and I think, well, I wouldn't be able to write this anymore, like I've changed too much, I'll just kind of abandon it. Whereas there's others where like I keep coming back to it and being like, fuck, I gotta figure out how I'm gonna finish this because it's so good, like my best writing is in unfinished work. So that's gonna torment me until it stops being true. I'll gonna break over to the chat real quick because Iluzon with 100 Czech dollar, I don't know what they're called. Please rant about how you feel right now about genuineness of IRL versus online friendships and relationships. I really think online relationships to me have to translate to real world relationships. Like, well, I don't know. I live a very different lifestyle from most people. A lot of people never travel ever in their lives, can't even conceive of like going 4 hours to meet a person. Like, if I have online friends that are, 4 hours, 6 hours, 10 hours away, and we can make a plan to do something together, then that's when I go hang out with people. I use like the internet to facilitate the fact that I'm hanging out with friends who I met online, but I know about them because of the internet is a better way to phrase it. Because a lot of the friends I've made in the last couple of years, I made like at conventions or through, just meeting them at like events and stuff like that. So there's tons of people who I know them because they are internet people and they went to an internet person gathering. But from my perspective, that's just one of my friends who I keep up with the things they do online and like talk to sometimes through the internet. But mostly I'm just always waiting to get back to the next time I can do something with someone in person. And, to me, friendship is mostly about like creating something together, you know, about like finding a project you can do, an excuse to be in the same place and make something out of it that you can reflect on, and like or even just, you know, having a plan of a thing to do that's fun, that's engaging for everyone involved. But like there's not many things that you can't do alone, that like, you know, like the most interesting things to do with other people to me are like creative things that require those people in order for it to happen. So like, yeah, I guess to me there's just not enough separation between IRL and online friendships. I don't have friendships that are only online. I did for a long time, but they were always awkward and strange, and like the types of people who want to have lots of online friendships tend to be people who want a lot of control in their interactions. And I was definitely one of those. Like I liked using text chat in particular. I didn't even do a lot of like calls and that kind of stuff. Even that's like a little bit different to me. When I think about internet relationships, I'm not usually thinking about like the sort of Zoomer idea of like the 12-hour Skype call. I'm more thinking about like being in chats where you have like a lot of control over just like getting up and walking away, and like also where there's a lot of breakdown because there's just so much body language being lost, you know? And yeah, it's hard to organize and like actually do a thing through the internet. I know there's people who have a lot of fun doing like watch parties or I don't know, getting together to draw sketches together. There's lots of things you can do through the internet that are friendly, that are ways to have a friend, but I just think doing it in person is almost always going to be a better experience. And if you really want to know someone, you have to know them in person. Languid Landscape Lad, with my next request, wants a request for their mal, to review their mal. All right. Sad Scenery Boy is the profile. I'm gonna go through. Let's look. I'm looking at their favorites lists. We've got Attack on Titan, which I was not initially a fan of back when it came out, but goddamn did it win me over. Particularly with season 4, like everything with the Marley story really like grabbed me. Did they make it so you can have a longer favorites list on Mal? What the fuck? Well, you can now have like 20 favorites on Mal, it looks like. That's crazy. The next one is Howl's Moving Castle. Interesting. I don't see a lot of people pick that as their favorite Ghibli film, but I do know a few who consider it as one of their favorites. Princess Mononoke is, of course, much more commonly considered like the greatest anime film of all time. Fooly Cooly, I'm a huge fan of. Gurren Lagann, awesome. Spirited Away, great fucking movie. Eureka 7, obviously I like it a lot because I've got a whole fucking video series on it. Vinland Saga is one where I wasn't that invested in the anime adaptation because the manga looks a lot better, and just like I was more compelled with that story before I saw it with like all the CGI and like the mixed media presentation. I have a whole video about that that you can watch to hear more about it. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is a lot of fun. Particularly you picked Stardust Crusader second half, I assume mostly for the final battle because that's the main reason people seem to love that half. Kaiji, great show. Highly recommended. Psycho-Pass is one of my favorites. Made in Abyss is great. Ping Pong. Hotarubi no Morie. I don't remember if I actually watched this or if I like noped out of it. I think I just don't really remember it. It's always been something that's been highly rated on Mal, and I've never really understood what it is. Penguin Highway is great. Kare Kano is great. Tatami Galaxy, great. Mushishi, Vampire Hunter D, and Planet With. I like it all. What can I say? You got perfectly fine, perfectly good taste. All the characters that they've chosen, it's like Gintama, Kaiji, Guts, Revi, Thorfinn, Kamina. I mean, how could you argue with any of these choices? It's just generally pretty good taste, man. Good job, Languid Landscape Lad. All right. I'm going to look into the next one. Meta-Tiresias, maybe, said, for my rant request, I'm very much into academic anime analysis, and I'd like to hear your take on Hiroki Azuma, Mechademia, any of its volumes will do, or Tokyo Cyberpunk, the book. If you don't know about any of those, may you do a rant on emotional one-shot anime, like stories that are designed to only be consumed once because of the emotions they touch on, like a story about losing someone. Have a very happy birthday. This was sent around my birthday. By the way, Andrew Cunningham still does translation work. He's a pain to get a hold of, but he still does freelance translation work when he gets work. I rarely see him advertise himself on LinkedIn unless he gets work and then disappears. Interesting to know. Andrew Cunningham, very influential translator on my life because he translated the Boogie Pop books. Anyway, I have not read any of those books, so I'm going to rant about emotional one-shot anime. I don't know if I think there's anything that is like meant to be consumed just once. I know there's like art pieces that literally are like self-destructive, or like they like destroy themselves upon being consumed and stuff like that. So I get that there's like some kind of precedent for like a one-time use piece of media. I also understand, like, if you lost someone and you are watching that piece of media because you're trying to deal with the grief and, like, you need something to cushion you through it, and maybe, like, watching it again would bring you back to that, like, painful place or something, that I could see that. I've never had something that, like, I thought, like, anything I've ever watched that had an emotional effect on me, I've been eager to see it again. So, I would say the things that I've seen that had the most like effect the first time and then diminished on repeat viewings, if that's what you mean. Like there are a lot of like just really short ones like Kanamewo. That was like a music video. It's like this post-rock like lesbian cute dating thing about this girl like finding this weird like god tree alien and dating her. And the first time I watched it, I remember it hitting me really hard. Just because I didn't expect it. I had no idea what I was in for, and it was so many just like things that obviously appeal to me that were in it that I was like taken aback. But like when I saw it again later, I was like, actually this isn't really that interesting when I know what it is. Yeah, that's like the only thing that really comes to mind is like something that I watched it and had like, you know, like a real and then like the next time it was just null. I've had movies where like where I had different emotional reactions like over and over again. Like My Neighbor Totoro is one where like the first time I saw it I had very little reaction to it. The second time I had a lot more, and then the third time even more. So like yeah, like I've definitely had the opposite effect plenty of times, and usually I feel like I understand a piece of media more and it makes me care. Actually, Bakano, that's a good example of a show that doesn't work as well the second time, because part of the appeal is that it mixes up 4 different books worth of storylines into one, like into like just bouncing between them, and it looks like, because of the fact that all of the stories come to a head at the end at the same time, and some of those stories are interconnected with each other, it makes it feel like the whole thing ends with this big bow at the, like a big awesome wrap, and like it all clicks into place when you see it the first time. When you watch the show the second time, there's a lot of episodes that are just kind of boring, and the stories really aren't that connected to each other at all. Like most of the characters are pretty like isolated to whatever they're doing. So yeah, like it just feels like there's a lot more downtime that's not really interesting or building to anything when you already know like where it's all going on repeat viewings, at least in my opinion. Yeah, those are the only ones I could really think of. Ghost Twin with my next request. This is a very long request. Hey, Beatrice, I was wondering if you could verbalize what you were thinking when reading my recent comment on your I Hate Digibro video, just because the thought sounds pretty funny. But I'd especially like to hear your stance on the Xeno series, as I have an endless hunger for Xeno conversation. First off, do you have any prior relationship with it, outside of what I heard in the December podcast? The rest will follow below. Okay, so is it one or the... I guess I'm going to read the rest of this first and then try to understand. It says, I understand just the video comment on its own was a little extensive. Then Xeno is a big topic to cover, and I have a lot to say, so I'm betting on $20 covering it all. Okay. Hope I'm not too overbearing. I appreciate you reading this. It did take me like 3 hours to construct, though. Okay, so for future reference, I do not offer longer rants for more money. I mean, I will just take this as it could be seen as buying 4 rants, I suppose. I'm not being asked to watch anything. So, I'm not going to complain. I'm going to do this, but I don't want it to set a precedent. I understand just the video comment. Oh, I already read that part. Anyway, keep in mind, I'm not the type of person that likes to waste time either. I am just about as selective of media as you are, but I understand maybe Xeno just isn't for you at your point in life. I get that it has primarily appealed to me as a younger person. I've seen every age group feel for it, though. So this rest of the request definitely doesn't need to be read out loud or responded to one-to-one, but it'd be cool if my mundanely argued conviction influences you to have another go at the Xeno series, if you haven't already gone through with what I'm recommending. I'm asking for a conclusion after the in-head read, but while not forcing a straight yes or no. If you would consider investing or not, I'm going to read it out loud because I'm doing it live. Something kind of setting me off is, you mentioned in the podcast with Xenosaga that one of the things you look for in a game is this grandiose RPG. You continue to elaborate, and Xeno is effectively the epitome of what was described. Not in the same vein as Digital Devil Saga, but at least the high end of what you're going to get in your search. Not going into analysis on the games, but everything about you makes me feel like you'd probably vibe with the Xenogears the hardest content-wise, but something like Xenoblade 1 or 3 might be more enjoyable gameplay-wise, and still really captures you with their more solid realism. I'd recommend Xenoblade 1 as your driving introductory before you get deeper into the whole, especially considering Xenoblade as a whole fixes the problem of redoing content after death by throwing you right back in where you were before you died without relying on saves. 1 is also a lot less overbearing about the otakuism and probably has decent enough pacing for you. Xenoblade X is simply an open world that's actually really fun to traverse when you can appreciate the environments and monsters. Shit plot to be real. I haven't gone through the Xeno sagas yet, but with everything I know, if you bunkered down and somehow willed 100 plus hours into it to see completion, you'd probably have a favorite on your hands. They're seemingly really all relatively good and consistent games in regards to ideology, for their own reasons and time periods when it comes to JRPGs. It's an interesting statement. You do overall have to get past, with a touch of open-mindedness tbh, the monotony of gaming, the otakuism of the director, and understanding that they want to be an anime, but an anime wouldn't fully fit for what the director has wanted to accomplish. Xenoblade 2 might be the worst offender in all of those categories, but with 14 hours of cutscenes, those factors actually largely attribute to why it's my favorite game, because they own it. Thanks for your time. Okay. That was a lot to unpack, but I have played most of the Xeno games, and I'm going to go through each of them one by one in chronological order. Xenogears is first. It wasn't the first one I played. The first one I played was Xenosaga, and that was because when I first got into RPGs, I was heavy on the PS2. Like I had a big PS2 phase. I got into RPGs, JRPGs, and just like bought all the big ones that had come out at the time. So Xenosaga was just kind of in the pile of other JRPGs I was playing, and I made it to like the first fight with the main like pissed off dude who hates robots. Can't remember his name, and I could not beat it. I didn't understand the fight mechanics well enough at the time, so I gave up. Now, I had remembered really liking it. I had always wanted to like it. I liked the designs. I liked the concept. So I kept returning to this series, and eventually I played Xenogears, initially I think on PSP for like an hour, and then later I played it on an emulator for like 8 hours or so. And I really like the writing and story in Xenogears. I think I also love the graphics. Like running around its setting is fun. I like the way the game opens with like you really get familiar with this small town and all the people in it, and then of course it gets destroyed, and like it's just enough time there that I hadn't seen it coming, and it was kind of traumatic to see happen the first time. And that was like the biggest inspiration for the way I did the first book of Kusomega. Like the decision to have that basically be how that book ends came from Xenogears. And then, from there, the story really is going down like an existential path in the way the characters think and the story. But there's a lot of combat. And I don't mind it. I think the combat is fun. But there's always a point during an RPG where I am more invested in the story than I am in playing the game, especially if it's slow. Especially if, like, if it's... and I think the emulator wasn't running right also, so I was having, like, issues with certain cutscenes. It was generally, like, it wasn't running just right, and by the time I got to the mecha section... I thought the mecha section was kind of boring. Like, I didn't enjoy the combat with the mechs, and it felt like I had gotten too far afield from the story to remain invested. And, like, I've stayed busy for the last 7 years doing YouTube. So, like, at the time, I was busy. I was doing other videos and stuff, and, like, as soon as I got, to the point where as soon as I got to the point where, like, I had lost any level of investment and stopped playing it, I couldn't remember enough of what had already happened to want to go back and continue. That tends to be what makes me lose interest in a piece of media, especially a video game, is, like, I'll leave it behind for, like, a week or two, and if I can't, like, remember exactly where I was at in the plot, it makes me realize I might not have been that invested in the plot. Digital Devil Saga was a similar example where that was a game where, like, I actually did really like the gameplay of that, but the plot just it was very thin and it wasn't really getting interesting. So as the game went on and it was, like, longer and longer between cutscenes and the cutscenes felt less and less engaging, it just made me think, like, what am I fighting for? Like, this combat is fairly repetitive. It's not like I'm doing something massively different all the time or anything. So next up is Xenosaga, and that one, again, it was the first one I played. I went back to it recently, actually. It was actually just last year. I started trying to make time for video games again, and I chose Xenosaga, and I really wanted to be committed to it, because I know the game has, like, long-ass cutscenes, and you really gotta, like, sit down and be like, this is what I'm doing for a few hours, is playing Xenosaga. My biggest problem with Xenosaga is I don't know a kinder way to put it than, like, how goddamn autistic it is. It feels... like, when you say otakuism of the creator, I think this is what you really mean. Because it's like the characters they can't help but write, like, obsessive tendencies into all the characters. And they all speak in, like, this way too formal manner. And, like, when I was younger playing this game, I had found, like, the stilted tone of it. Like, I thought that made it more intellectual or something because I couldn't understand it. It felt like, everyone's kind of talking above my head. And then when I play it now, I'm like, no, they're all just kind of talking weird. And it's not the translation, though that doesn't help, but it's just like everyone's talks in, like, a kind of a backwards way, and there's just way too much detail, way too much extra, like, back and forth between the characters about what's going on, way too much tech jargon that doesn't mean fucking anything. It's just, like, so over the top with the cringier aspects of sci-fi, and also the character relationships are very, like, juvenile. So yeah, even though the characters are cute and they are likable in their own way, and there's things about the sci-fi setting that make it fun, it is cheesy. It is a little over the top. It is a little hard to get, like, sincerely emotionally invested in it. And the cutscenes are long as shit. So, like, the first section of the game, when you're running around on the ship, I think is a total blast. You start off in, like, a VR game, like a quick little tutorial map. which if you play back through, you can get like bonus materials. And so there's an element of like you really want to explore this ship inside and out, so you can get all the like little hidden stuff to power yourself up for later in the game. Tons of like little mini games and stuff like setups and payoffs rather, in that section where like you meet people who tell you something, and then like later after catastrophe strikes, then you see like some crazy scenario that they found themselves in that's often very violent, or it's a real fucking wild opener for the game. It's similar to Xenogears in that you spend a lot of time familiarizing yourself with this like town, and then it just gets like completely fucked, but this time it's on a space station. And so yeah, like I have pretty vivid memories in my head right now, like of me wandering around the space station and like just investigating stuff. And I always have the most fun with RPGs in like the towns. In the dungeon crawling usually gets obnoxious to me after a point, especially if like there's not enough in between the fights, or if the fights are too like rote, or if there's like one strategy that'll always win, if there's like a really easy way to win every fight that's in the dungeon. Something that was great about Digital Devil Saga was like there was sort of like strats that you could figure out for certain enemy combinations, but every enemy combination you had to do something a little bit different in order to like conserve enough materials to make it through the incredibly long slogs of dungeon. It was just enough to keep it interesting. Xenosaga is very slow in the battles. Like you have this system where like you do combos by doing certain button presses, and you have like AP points that build up that you can like save some and use on the next turn. And all of it's very patient. The animations are really long. The battle music gets old kind of quick, although it is really good. Like I just heard it enter my head, and I'm like, yeah, okay, I like the song, but like I heard too much of it. Too much of the sound effects, too much of the voice acting, which is usually kind of cute even in the dub, I'll admit. But when you get through that whole ship segment, and the most fun part actually is when you talk to all the little AI robots, because the main character explicitly like doesn't understand humans but does understand robot emotions for whatever, because like she programs them. So like she just sees it as like, oh, logically you would feel this way because I programmed you to, even though like it's all just copying the way humans already are. But she doesn't get it when it's humans. So yeah, she's a bit of a ditz, and all that's fine, all that's lovable. The character's great, the opening segment's great. After that whole opening segment, there's an insanely long cutscene before you transition into playing as a different guy. And he's an android dude who's like he wants to die. Like he's like on a mission that will give him permission to be killed, and he has to go like assassinate this little girl robot or something like that. Anyway, you end up playing as this dude for like a stealth mission, and it's not fun. He's not really fun to play as, and he's by himself, so there's not really much complexity or difference in what you can do during the actual combat. You can avoid some of the combat through stealth, but there's also reasons to actually engage, and there's like items hidden throughout the environment. It's a fairly long section before getting to a save point, and I had just gotten like so pulled out of the story by like switching characters, by how much more boring the combat was, by being kind of frustrated with the mechanics of the part, and then like dying a couple times and having to restart it from like 10-20 minutes back. I was like, I can't do it no more. And that was where I stopped playing Xenosaga. Still interested, kind of. But I don't know if it's enough of my thing to be worth the things that are a headache about it. So I don't know. Maybe I would finish Xenosaga, maybe not. Especially because I know that the 3 games that exist each are kind of self-contained stories to enough of an extent that you could play them and like it'll feel like it's over. But I know they were supposed to make like 6 games in that series. Xenoblade Chronicles. I played like 6 hours of. I did a review of it on my Adventure Action RPG series, which was like the first YouTube video series I really did with it that was anything like what I've done since. And I was not a big fan of the game because it's just too complicated. And I didn't find the story or characters all that interesting. I really hate listening to like the battle commands. I find it dissatisfying to do like menu-driven combat. I tend to play video games so that I can like whack things. I know I'm saying, okay, when I say menu-driven, I don't mean like the traditional JRPG, like where the characters are standing apart from each other. When you have control of the character, but you are combating through menus, it feels weird. Especially if you don't just have like a press A to hit button. Like at least Kingdom Hearts, like, you know, you switch what the button does, but sometimes the button does hit, and sometimes it does fire. In Xenoblade, it's like, your character's just kind of on autopilot like in World of Warcraft, and then you like cast. So it functions like an MMO, but to me, the point of MMO combat being the way that it is that it's so much harder to do active combat with like a massive multiplayer game. That's why it was like revolutionary when games like Terra and Black Desert started doing like a more active combat system. So it's weird to me that a single player RPG would go the route of having such like boring to actually physically play combat. And also, I know the game has been like re-released and remastered and stuff, but on the Wii, the aliasing was really bad, and it just kind of ruined all that gorgeous environmental design that they did for me. Music's epic. But yeah, I didn't make it that far. All the complexity of it was foreboding to me. All the like tracking NPCs and the crazy amount of like crafting system and stuff. All that is scary to me. I haven't played Xenoblade Chronicles X or Xenoblade 2. I am interested because of the mech flying. Like, flying mechs around an open world looks fucking awesome. I remember seeing the trailers for, I think, Xenoblade Chronicles and being, like, blown away by the way it looked. But my brother played them and didn't, like, he had the same impressions of, like, the story, I think. Oh, I forgot about Xenoblade X. I think I played, like, 5 minutes of that and thought it looked cool, but I didn't get back to it. So, yeah, that's all of them. Very long rant. Thank you for the $20. I'm going to switch back to the YouTube chat because I have another super chat rant request. This one comes from VNerd for $10, who says, compare and contrast Sword Art Online, Excel World, Dot Hack, and Lane. Include timeline for development of the internet and commentary. Okay, so the internet was like invented in the early 90s, and people, you know, you used to go to a website, you typed in the URL, and you fucking you went to a place where there was like a page and you read a thing, and maybe you interacted with other people, but you really had to know what you were doing. It wasn't like something that just regular ass people were doing. It was mostly like people who work with computers, who understand email, you know, sending each other correspondence through this digital landscape. Serial Experiments Lane came out in 1998 and understood the internet better than any other piece of media did or like possibly could have at the time. It's obvious to me that Chiaki Kanaka, being a big tech nerd, being a writer, was using the internet heavily in the 90s, had clearly like made friends and met people and been a part of like hacker groups and just was totally in the culture, and that's why he was able to write a show like that. Nothing else really has come out that takes the same approach, because Lane was futuristic. It was trying to be futuristic, in that like the level on which Lane could interface with the technology kept increasing. So it was like she eventually had a full physical presence inside of the internet. But what that actually meant or amounted to in the show is nothing different from what the internet already is. It was just an abstraction of like what eventually would become like something anybody could understand about the internet. And I think the show's become way more relatable over time. as people like develop online identities and see how those can like get away from them and become a different person from who they really are, which is what the real like point of the show is. So yeah, Lane, it's got a lot to say. It's deep. It's layered. It's really good, really well directed, perfect sound design. Rest in peace to the director. The next one would be Dot Hack Sign, which came out in, I think, early 2002. And that show is about an MMORPG. So it's also kind of contemporary in that like most of what's going on within the show is just... So like the main character is trapped inside the game because it's like a virtual headset game. But it's not like Sword Art Online where you have full range movement inside the video game or anything. Like it really is headsets just so that it can be somewhat futuristic and you can convey like more movement on the part of the characters believably without animating it the way that like games actually looked at the time, which would be like EverQuest. You know, it looks like an anime. So the world, I mean, if you play the PS2 games, it looks like a PS2 game. Really good looking PS2 game, but it's just simply that as an MMORPG, you know, in order to convey the idea that characters have a level of control beyond like what a controller might provide, and also like maybe more literalize why like they could be knocked out and taken into the game, they wear headsets. But it's really just like the main character who's like trapped in the game, and honestly it's all just like a metaphor for being like body dysmorphic in the first place. You know, the story ends with the character like leaving a hospital, so like it's more like their consciousness was trapped in the game when their body was in a coma or something like that. Mostly that game, that show rather, uses the abstraction of video games to comment on dissociation and like the tendencies of the kind of people who, like Tsukasa, like reject social connection and like go into a world full of people to continue escaping people. I think it had a pretty solid understanding of like how people socialize in MMOs, but certain things like the whole like police forces, the in-game police force always struck me as like a little over the top, like how much control the Crimson Knights have over other players. Although I don't know if they're like mods or some of them are mods or whatever. I was always pretty sure they were just like a player coalition or something, but I could be wrong. It's been a long time since I've actually watched all of Dot Hack Sign. But yeah, it's I think it's pretty good at representing MMOs, but that's because it's not trying that hard to use MMO mechanics to tell its story. It plays the most like Phantasy Star Online, so I think that's what they were really like driving influence from in terms of MMO mechanics and the way things are instanced. You know, like basically it's a town, like you're either in a town or you're in a dungeon. It's not a game where there's just like an open world that you can run around. And I think making it that way allowed them a lot more control with the setting, and you know, not to have like this idea that like you always kind of know where the characters could be or where they are. The next one would be Sword Art Online, written the same year as Dot Hack. Was it with awareness of Dot Hack? I don't know. Seems likely to me, but Reki Kawahara originally wrote the light novel for a contest that he was not able to finish it in time to actually enter. But Sword Art Online, by his own admission, Kawahara said, like, I'm not good at MMOs. He was never a high-level player. He never really understood the culture of the games. He wanted to write a story about the kind of high-level player that he wished he was. And so that's why it doesn't really function correctly as an MMO game. Like, it doesn't reflect the culture or the mechanics correctly because Kawahara just didn't understand the culture or the mechanics that well. He wanted to build a fantastical idea of a game and a fantastical idea of how it's interacted with. So, you got the full consciousness, like, upload type mechanics, or not even upload, but it's like, the Neuralink. That's what the fucking thing is called. Everybody gets sucked into the game. It's really more of a death game than it is about being an MMO. It's pretty much like Hunger Games, but in a video game. Looks cool. I think what it captured the best was the zeitgeist of how people wanted video games to look and feel. Like, what SAO understood, and like what the main theme of the story really ends up being about, is like the idea that that life could just be better inside a virtual world. That, like, Kirito thinks that being in the headset and being in the game is just literally better, and why would he ever not want to be there? And so he spends the rest of his life pretty much trying to bridge the gap between real life and technology so that he can spend more and more time inside the technology. It's really funny when I put it like that, because it's just such a, like, unhealthy mindset that this character has, but it drives him to create the technology of Excel World, which I'll get into next, because you also asked about that. That was Kawahara's next work, and, like, it is literally supposed to be, like, futuristically downstream from SAO. The point is that, like, they had Neuralink, and now they've made it, like, AR Neuralink. So, like, you can see, not only can you go into, like, the internet, but you can go into, like, an internet layer over reality type shit. Actually, I've always been kind of confused about how the internet thing works in Excel World. There's so many weird rules and layers to that fucking show. But, yeah, I mean, I've never been a fan of Excel World or Sword Art Online, so it's hard for me to describe them in too much detail. Excel World's, like, more taking mechanics from, like, shooter games and stuff, and, like, arena type games, and incorporating those into, like, an AR fronted reality. But yeah, so I would say that those games feel probably more like Second Life, or like the kind of games that people just live inside of. I mean, I know MMOs are also games people live inside of, but, like, the vibe I got off of Excel World was, like, outside of all the fighting going on, people are just, like, chilling in a video game, or a video game, like, version of the reality they're already in. All right, that's all I have to say about those. We'll move on to the next rant. Off for Makash. This month, can you rant about your favorite movies about the Holocaust? I'm going to have to look up movies about the Holocaust. This is one I probably should have said I couldn't do, because I can't immediately even think of a movie about the Holocaust that I've actually seen. I haven't seen Schindler's List. I didn't know Sophie's Choice was about Nazis. That explains why it's brought up so often as a cultural reference. I literally had no idea. Haven't seen Life is Beautiful. Haven't seen Capo. Haven't seen Holocaust. Haven't seen The Pianist. Haven't seen Train of Life or Fateless or Playing for Time or The Gray Zone. I'm just going to keep scrolling through. I haven't even heard of most of these movies. I can tell you what my favorite movie about a genocide that I have seen is. Since scrolling through this, I literally don't think I've seen a single Holocaust movie. Hotel Rwanda is a film about the Rwandan genocide that we watched when I was in high school. And it's pretty fucked up, because the thing that, like, got to me the most and was so terrifying about it is that Rwanda goes from being, like, relatively at peace to, like, someone comes on TV. I don't remember the details of this because it's been a long time since I've seen the movie, so forgive me for not knowing the names of, like, this actual historical event. But, like, someone comes on TV and just, like, kind of makes the announcement of, like, hey, we're gonna kill all the guys that are part of this, like, other racial group, and then like the main character kind of like goes out into the street and just sees a dude getting like run down and butchered with the machete, and it's like it just starts, and then it's just fucking pandemonium and people dragging each other into the streets and killing each other, and like a train of refugees just having to fucking find a way out and just run off, and like that's how the movie ends, is like watching people flee the completely fucked like city that they lived in, and seeing the quickness with which, you know, like a segment of the population can just be activated to just go murder the other segment of the population is awful to think about. I'm sure the Holocaust movies would make me feel as bad or worse, which is probably why I haven't seen them. But now I feel like I really do owe it to myself to watch me some Holocaust movies. I feel uncultured right now for not having seen a single one of them. Anyway, the next one is from Starlight Studios. Hey Trixie, happy birthday. Just became a patron, so writing to submit a rant request for the month of August. The request is for my Mal account. Thanks in advance and have a great day. All right. This profile is from Animated for Life. They have a scoring scale. I'm going to read the scoring scale. It looks kind of similar to the way that mine is written out on my Mal. All right, we've got 10, something that appeals to me in so many specific ways that I could sing its praises without end. More than a story, it's a world unto itself that I look forward to revisiting and experiencing well into the future. Yeah, that sounds like a 10. A 9, something that leaves me with such a powerful sense of emotion and self that the show becomes synonymous with that feeling. It perfectly embodies its ideas and imparts them in ways you won't ever forget. Also kind of sounds like a 10, but okay. 8, shows that earn this score are ones I'd readily rewatch. The themes shine through in every aspect of the world and characters, so much so that the series itself becomes a reference point for the concepts introduced or its particular take of a concept. They also strike a sweet spot with tone and pacing that makes them a treat to marathon. This marks the start of shows I get excited just thinking about. Again, all of that could have been a 10. All those could mean the same thing pretty much, so I'd say squanch all that into one just like big positive. Number 7. Clear thematic follow-through and a fair number of standout traits. They may fall short in some areas, but have enough strengths that I'd still consider watching them. A 6. Distinguishes itself from other shows of its ilk in at least one aspect, but fails to generate lasting interest. And then it says, given that I'll drop a show within the first minute if it seems bland or outright bad, these scores will rarely be used below. I'll give a description to one when I sit through enough of an anime that deserves it. So, okay, so 7 or 6 is like small plus. 5. At this point, the show feels soulless. It follows structural rules of storytelling, but little else. 4 is lacks coherence, so that's small minus. And then 3 is a ... 2 is ... and 1 is Zero no Tsukaima. Ooh, harsh. Harsh burn on Zero no Tsukaima. I like Zero no Tsukaima. What you got against Zero no Tsukaima? It's fine. Well, yeah, again, the way that this is written, I really think that you only need 4 numbers. Or four symbols, rather. Use the Bakuraptor, because Bakuraptor scale has 6 symbols. It goes plus, 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 or minus, 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 minus for the downside. Yours, I don't even think needs that much. I think it could just be double plus, plus, minus, double minus. Any more than that is overthinking. And then we get into random reviews. There's just a random assortment of reviews that are on the page. They're pretty short. I'll go through them. Excel World, Light 8, with an asterisk next to it. So we're using Anthony Fantano ratings. The light to decent to solid, right? Or no, light to decent to... Yours says solid. Strong. Light to decent to strong, but you went light to solid to strong, which is also interesting because Fantano talked about when I was interviewed with him, how the rating scale, like light is the opposite of heavy. Like the gradient would be like light to heavy. Decent is like good, decent, great, and then strong would be like weak to strong. They're all completely different, so it makes no fucking sense, and that's what I think makes it so brilliant. But this one, you've swapped out decent for solid, which is a whole other different thing. It could be liquid or solid, or I'm not even sure where the gradient would go. Anyway, Excel World, Light 8 with an asterisk. One of the first series I watched that revolved around a virtual world. It had everything I wanted at the time, and I'm guessing I'd still enjoy it now. A youth-exclusive virtual world that moves at an accelerated pace and is designed to have players battle their way to the top. However, players who lose all their points in battle have the game forcibly uninstalled and their memories wiped. This leads to major factions calling for an armistice, as many players value the experience the game offers and don't wish to lose access to that world. For others, this peace breeds stagnation, which pushes them down a war path to reach the highest level and uncover the game's greatest secrets. Character conflict and motivation largely draws from the nature of the game, which adds weight to the world as a whole. There are certain conceits I'd expect to raise an eyebrow at here and there, but nothing that would detract from everything else the show does right. I mean, frankly, the conceits mentioned made me raise an eyebrow just reading it. I would say that was a well-written review, but it did not make it sound like a light 8 of a show. Achikochi, solid 6 with another asterisk. Don't remember much other than some wholesome gags and a comfy atmosphere. Well, okay. Aho Girl with a strong 7. Fun gags, amusing characters, and simple subversions. Threw this one on after joking/arguing about how the banana love definitely included other things as well, and it certainly did. This idiot girl is always on the hunt, especially for the main males. With an apostrophe for the main males. Banana? It's subtle but clear in the beginning, then the creators do me a favor and confirm it outright at the end. Easy win. Recommended for some laughs, and the blue-haired girl whose name I don't know. That was the show that was like drawn, it was based on a manga drawn by a porn artist, right? So it was just like a girl being, no, I'm thinking of a different one. That was the one where the girl was like late for school all the time or something. I don't know. I know there were bananas, but the way that was written was interesting. Muggy Brilliant Park, solid 7. The novelty of a narcissistic main character and sensible heroine were what kept me with this show early on. The main male also received a power that gave him very vague Lelouch vibes near the start and earned the show a little more goodwill. As I continued to watch, that impression faded, as did any application of the power, and I just took joy in moment-to-moment happenings over whatever was being done to the narrative. It was a colorful world with some fun moments. Buy a ticket, not a season pass. One time we'll do it. That's cute. Buy a ticket, not a season pass for the Brilliant Park show. I like that. Fate Kaleid Liner Prisma Ilia with a light 8. An incredibly meta magical girls show that is single-handedly responsible for my fascination and love for the genre. It seamlessly pokes fun at common tropes while telling an engaging narrative through those same means. The primary focus falls on Ilia, a normal girl who's dragged from her everyday life into a magical battle. Given her image of magical girls, she initially goes along with these developments to chase an exciting fantasy, but once the threat of death rears its head, she's desperate to escape it all. Throughout this journey, Miu serves as her peer and also the main point of comparison. In this way, we learn a significant amount about both characters with their dynamic, bringing the themes of normalcy, fear, and friendship to life. Themes of normalcy, fear, and friendship. Interesting. Tonally, the series balances levity and intensity well, never lingering too long on one sentiment or transitioning too quickly from another. Even if you know nothing of Fate and can't appreciate the humor or depth of having these characters in these roles, you have plenty to look forward to in this self-contained story. If you're familiar with Fate, you not only get all that, but a fresh take on beloved concepts like noble phantasms and the Holy Grail War. Give Prisma Ilia a go. There's a whole other review for the second season that's even longer. I'm not going to read that. Oh, there's another one for the third season. It's even longer. You really like that Fate Kaleid Liner Prisma Ilia? I wasn't that engaged with it. Didn't make it that far. Jojo, Kaguya-sama. Jojo's got a 9. Kaguya's got a 9. Kaiji's got a 10. And My Hero Academia with an 8 for these reviews. Let's see. Okay, yeah, the number 1 anime in this list, Fate Kaleid Liner Prisma Ilia 3. That's the first time I've ever seen that. So I will give you, Starlight Studios, this is an interesting Mal list, because I've never seen someone who likes Fate Kaleid Liner Prisma Ilia as much as you do. I appreciate it. Hunter x Hunter 2011 is great. Log Horizon great. Kill la Kill great. Black Lagoon great. K-On! Great. Kaiji great. Kuroko no Basket, I like that show. Hey, Mob Psycho 100 and Maid Dragon, all great anime, great taste, less filling. manga. You got Fate, One Piece, Kami no Mizo Shiro Sekai, which I think is fun. Soul Eater, which is great. Bakuman, great. Fullmetal Alchemist is, you know, Death Note, Naruto. Oh, hey, Love Me for Who I Am. This manga is really fucking adorable. One of my favorites. I did a whole recommendation video on it. And Blaze Blue Remix Heart. Must be a Blaze Blue fan, I take it. And it looks like your favorite Prisma Ilia character is Chloe von Einsburn. That girl do be cute. She do be cute. I could never love Fate the way that you do. Alright, well, that's all I'm going to say about that. Thanks. We do not have any more Super Chat rant requests right now, so I'm going to continue with my Patreon rant requests. But if anybody wants a rant request right now, you can get one by making a Super Chat. I also have to go grab a Super Chat from a previous premiere. Somebody did a rant request not realizing that it was a live stream. Or not a live stream, rather. So I'm going to go see if I can track that down really quick. Super Chat. Super Chat. Alright, let's see. Alright, yes, I found him. It's just this one. Wait, are there two? Okay, yeah, there's a couple, actually. One is from Thymic. It says, how do you deal with relationship anxiety? I'm autistic and may start my first relationship within the next week, but I can't sleep anymore from stress. Honestly, if your anxiety is towards someone you're in a relationship with, share with them. Talk to them about the anxiety that you feel. They will probably reassure you about your anxieties, and if they don't, maybe they're not that good of a partner for you. But like, the main cause of anxiety tends to be staying inside your head. It tends to be that you're overthinking things, you're creating like problems inside your head that don't actually exist for other people, and you won't know if those problems exist for other people until you ask them or even, you know, raise the idea that stuff is in your mind. And so like when you start talking to someone else and, you know, you guys can get your expectations on the same page, that's when you'll stop having anxiety about your relationship. Is when you know what the expectations are and you know that they're being met happily for both of you. So communication is the only way out of the anxiety, especially for relationships. If you have anxiety about your relationship, your partner's going to pick up on it. It's going to keep you away from them. It's just, you know, it's going to stay and fester until you work through it together. It's nothing you can do about it on your own, because trying to do something about it on your own is what anxiety is, essentially. And then there's this one from my Whoops, I've Lived Past 30 video. Did I already answer this? It's from Wormself. If anything to me, it was... Oh, no, this isn't a rant request. It was just somebody give me $50 because I'm cool. Excellent. All right, that's the Super Chat rant request. Going back to the Patreon. Arter Hauser. Let's see. Yeah, okay, that was the last one I did. Hello, Trixie. Funny seeing this DM history and how it's been 3 years since the last rant request when you were still Digi. Rest his soul. Anyway, please rant about marriage. How do you feel about the traditional institution of marriage where you live, and what are the perks? I always think about how Dick Masterson always says he's against gay marriage because he's against marriage in general. Also, most importantly, how is it like being married? Thanks. Love all you do. Well, I'm not married. I know I've given the impression before because I've called my partner my husband. But mostly it's because I see the way that the internet treats someone that you call like a boyfriend or fiance versus like a husband, and so I want people to think of my partner that way. But as for marriage itself, like, I've always understood there to be certain potential benefits that like the government affords you, or even just like, for instance, if I was marrying a woman and she got pregnant and was having my baby in the hospital, if we're married, I can be there. If we're not, I'm not family and they can kick me out, you know. And it's just like little things like that that always made me think, well, wouldn't it be worth doing it just so that you have that, or like tax advantages, all this. Like, there's certain things that in certain situations would make sense for why you would want to get married. I don't really know what they are or have any personal stake or investment in, like, I need to get married for X reason. You know, emotionally, I think most people do it because they want like a concrete promise of dedication from their partner. I think that making it like easy and like a given kind of actually disempowers you to try harder at just making the relationship stay together and be consistent without any kind of like legal pretense involved, forcing you to. So, you know, it's hard for me to see in particular what makes marriage like meaningful outside of like the legal and like you know, governmental, I guess, circumstances of like, or economic circumstances of why marriage like contractually is a thing. All the emotional side of it, I don't feel as powerfully. You know, my parents got married after like 6 weeks of knowing each other and have been together for 32 years. So I know that there is a certain power in marriage and its ability to hold a family together, especially mine. My parents also had 3 kids and a very like, you know, before they were 30, and a very like domestic normal life that I'm not really seeing for myself or going for. You know, I'm not trying to have 3 kids and I'm past 30. So like, I just don't see myself like needing to get married for like the reasons that my parents did or the reasons that most people do. I think marriage sounds fun, especially having like a big cool wedding ceremony, but like my conception of what a cool wedding ceremony is very different. Like, I hate churches. I don't want to wear like a all white gown or anything like that. You know, like the thought of a cool marriage to me is like picking your own music, picking like a cool theme, doing it in a fucking field, you know, with your friends and stuff, and then like getting shit faced afterwards. But, you know, doing it at a level where, because my family is spread all over the country and my friends are spread all over the country, so there was a period where Bird and I were talking about getting married and like, when should we do it? Where should we do it? Who do we bring? Like, how the fuck are we gonna afford to make it interesting at all? And at the end of the day, I was just like, man, it costs so much to make a good wedding, and a wedding is not typically a fun party. Like, if you're gonna spend $10,000 to throw a party with all your friends, a wedding is like the lamest thing you could fucking force them to sit through, you know? So it's hard for me to justify. Like, when I really think about it and I like try to picture myself inviting people to fly to a thing to make a commitment to something I'm already committed to, is like, you know, it would have to be something special and be like a right place, right time kind of thing. So I'm neither counting marriage out nor saying it's something I'm actively in pursuit of currently. I am engaged, but you know, that could I'd not like in a rush to make the engagement become legally recognized by the state, because I don't really see what the benefits would be for me in the short term at present. As for like gay marriage in particular, as opposed to straight, no opinion. They're all the same thing. Kudere-kun said, thank you for doing my July request. You brought another ethical issue I hadn't even thought of. For my August request, even though you generally have nothing but praise for Moon Knight, I think it would be fun to see you rant on Grant calling Avatar The Last Airbender an anime in the first episode. Grant? Oh, in Moon Knight, of course. Yeah, sorry, the way that was phrased confused me for a second. But yes, the character in Moon Knight refers to Avatar The Last Airbender as an anime they're a fan of. Honestly, so, okay, I have a video that I made once called What is Anime and What Isn't, where I say anime is a Japanese colloquialism that is short for the word animation. And in it, I essentially argued that in order for anime to maintain any kind of solid definition, it had to only refer to Japanese productions made for a Japanese audience, because there were too many shows that weren't considered anime culturally that were animated in Japan for a Western audience, and too many shows that are anime influenced but again, don't identify as anime. And there's tons of anime that don't look like Avatar, so like to say that Avatar is anime just because it looks like some anime is sort of reductive of what anime means specifically. Now, having said that, there came a point where a studio from, I think, Iran was doing a Kickstarter for explicitly an Iranian anime. That was what they were calling it, was anime. And I watched the trailer, and while the animation style was a little different from most Japanese anime, it was clearly supposed to be like a Mazinger parody. It was very Go Nagai inspired. All of its blood came from anime. It's like a historical reference point. So, like, Avatar is a show where I know that the animators literally were told they had to watch Fooly Cooly to work on the show. I see the Fooly Cooly references in the visuals. I see little spritz of Full Metal Alchemist and little elements of influence from anime here and there. I also see lots of Western influence, and I see mostly like the way that it's animated is much more Western and has more to do with like DC comic adaptations than it does with anime adaptations, or rather manga adaptations. So I don't know if I would have considered Avatar an anime, but because of the fact that it has just ended up there categorically through like streaming sites, through conversation, through the fact that like lots of people watch it as part of their anime journey. They don't watch it separately from anime. So like if somebody tells me that they think that show is anime, I'm not going to tell them it's not. I'm not going to be like, Avatar's not anime, it's not even Japanese. It's functionally anime. There are tons of places all over the world that are now making what they explicitly consider anime. Even my anime list now includes like all the Chinese anime-esque shows that sometimes I guess have some kind of like Japanese co-production or something, but a lot of them are just Chinese anime, and that's just a thing that people now consider to be a thing. So yeah, I don't know. I'm much looser about what I think the definition of anime is now than I had been back then. We've got another super chat rant request. This one's from Mike Hunt for $5 Australian. It says, rant about the futility of talking about things out of your control, like politics or culture war. Culture war, rather. Yeah, I have really kind of given up on like sharing opinions on things that my opinions won't change anything about. Like, if I'm talking about politics one way or another, I don't know who I'm really helping by sharing even what I think is a correct take. And like, especially if it's about a situation that I don't have all of the knowledge on, then it's like I'm basically catching a glimpse of a thing through a lens that somebody has given me, and then forming an opinion about it, So like if a news article like presents me with a story that they gave me through a lens they want me to think about it through, and then I extrapolate from that my own thoughts about that article, I'm no longer even referencing the original event. I'm referencing the event as interpreted by the article, and then now I am like as a tertiary source talking about it. And at that point, even if whatever I had to say is interesting, it's so divorced from reality that it really doesn't have anything to do with what actually happened and what the ramifications of that thing happening are. And it just creates more noise and more potential for more misunderstandings and more reactions to things that aren't even real when you start like just saying whatever thoughts come into your head about every single thing that you see, regardless of how like much truth even there is to the way that it was presented to you in the first place. So like, if I go out, I might think I'm like defending something noble or saying something righteous, and then like in actuality, like I'm playing into exactly what, like I might be doing what the person who wrote the article wanted me to do, You know, like they wrote it in such a way that they want me to interpret it in a way that I'm going to say the thing I'm going to say about it. And I don't know what they stand to gain from that, or what the, you know, whoever propagated the event originally in question stands to gain from that. It's just so many layers past my actual experience and my actual, again, yeah, like you said, ability to affect something. Like, you know, if a riot happens in Milwaukee and like I have an opinion about it, it's not going to affect fucking anything anywhere. If I was, you know, if a riot happened in my city and I had an opinion about it, it would be because I went outside, watched it, and described what I saw. And even then, what I saw is not what happened necessarily, because it's just like, again, a lens. It's my perspective on a thing that I don't really understand unless I like get to the bottom of it, unless I knew how it started, unless I was like at the inception of the event. How can I really say what's going on? So yeah, I'm not a fan of like trying to speak on things that I'm not immediately close to or can't have an immediate effect on. Mike Hunt with another Australian $5 says, would you not refer to Avatar as anime when speaking Japanese? I probably would. I think so. Yeah, like I brought up in that video that anime being a Japanese colloquialism for animation, you know, it did not originally for Japanese people refer to just strictly Japanese animation. It just, you know, anime is just anime. But I also know that much like there are Americans who specifically are like, oh, I like anime, not cartoons, there are Japanese people who are like, I specifically like cartoons, not anime. There's people who, you know, who want there to be a separation because they like Western cartoons more, or who want there to be a separation because they don't like Western cartoons, don't want it to be included with anime. So, you know, how much people divide this stuff is usually more of like a personal identity issue. Like, if even for me, like at the time that I wrote that what is anime and what isn't video, like the main reason that was that it was bugging me so much is that I categorically was interested in anime, Japanese animation. There is animation from the West that I just wasn't categorically interested in, because everything to me that I had seen as anime plays into the meta structure of anime that like has this traceable history that I can go back through. And again, like when I saw that Mazinger-like show, it didn't seem like it had any blood from anywhere other than anime, you know? So when I saw that, I was like, well, fuck, how can I call this not anime just because it's not from Japan, when it, you know, by all intents and purposes, its only influence is anime, which I couldn't say about Avatar, you know? So like, at this point, I do think Avatar has had a reverse influence back into anime. I think inevitably it's become a worldwide successful series and a recognizable title that probably if it aired on Japanese TV, a kid is not going to know it's not a Japanese show, in the same way that nobody watches Transformers and thinks about how the animators are Japanese. It's just not on anyone's mind when they're watching it. So yeah, probably if a Japanese kid had any exposure to Avatar, they probably would think it was anime. I really doubt that there's many. I would say there's probably fewer people who would argue that Avatar is not anime than there are people who would argue that it is, or just simply state that it is without getting into an argument about it. All right, let's move on to another rant request. I've got a couple left. This one is from Darker Than Black, who gives me several rant options. Rant option 1 is top 4 alcoholic drinks and why. Rant option 2, do you consider yourself to be a journalist? Why or why not? Or rant option 3, what do you think about this whole power scale community within Dragon Ball Z, where they talk about the power levels of characters and start ranking and calculating them in a serious, objective manner? All right. I'll answer the first one really quickly because I don't really have a why. But top 4 alcoholic drinks. I like Kir Royale. I like what's it called when you mix orange juice with champagne. Mimosas. I generally like champagne, so mixing champagne with other stuff that like takes off the bite of it a little bit is always excellent. I get gin tonics often. Oh, Long Island iced tea, particularly blue Long Island iced tea or a blue margarita. When I'm at a bar, that's usually what I'll order to guarantee I'm going to enjoy my drink. So yeah, that's pretty much that. Do I consider myself a journalist? Yeah, I've always considered myself a journalist. I'm literally journalizing my experiences all the time. I understand that people who are in the trade of professional journalism, who have attended college about it and gotten the degrees, there are certain like rules and principles that they hold themselves to that certain people would say, like, you're not a journalist unless you do XYZ. I've always put myself in the category of gonzo journalism, like Hunter Thompson, my idol. My purpose is to go out, experience something, and write about the experience itself. So, rather than being a critic in the sense that I'm trying to like judge a work based on its own like measures or like, how well it accomplished what it was setting out to do, I'm judging it by how well it reached me or how much or whatever effect it had on me. I'm interested in reflecting back the emotional experience in some kind of like creative fashion, So like, to me, like the gonzo journalism is essentially like me, finding a way to turn any experience I have into something that I can relate to other people about. It's always been easiest for me to look at things through the lens of myself because I am myself, obviously, but how many different experiences can I relate to and have something interesting to say about that will connect to somebody else? Sometimes I've said things like, for instance, coming out heavy against Sword Art Online at the start of my career. I wasn't looking at that in particular as like a journalistic endeavor. It was like a show I was interested in because my brother Victor had started off a big fan of it and eventually come to really despise it. I had watched like 7 episodes and thought it was okay, but a little bit too young for me and just kind of lost interest. And then like I had my first girlfriend became obsessed with the show not too long before we ended up breaking up. I think partly over the fact that like I really looked down on the show. I just kind of saw it as like childish. And so like, it really created like a divide between us. The fact that she loved this show and I was like totally just fucking dismissive of it. And then after we broke up, I became curious about it. I wanted to see if it was something I could become interested in. And so I decided to watch it with my brother Victor and like see if he could explain to me like what he had liked about it in the first place, where he saw it like going downhill and all that. And in the course of watching it, just ended up like, violently despising it and really just being like uninterested, bored, disappointed, like, way more offended than I thought I was going to be and all that kind of stuff. So I made that video not expecting people to connect with it because I thought I was being like almost too gonzo. It's like, this is the thing everybody loves. I bought the ticket, I took the ride, I went all the way to the end, and I had a miserable experience, and like none of y'all had a miserable experience. I know because you all told me to watch this show. So, I'm just going down with this ship. And I didn't expect it to be something people were going to respond positively to in the long run. And like even still, like a lot of my biggest videos are super controversial. They're about shows people love, and they have like half like bars, half dislike bars. And that's fine for me because like, for something like that SAO video, if 500,000 people agreed with me and, who saw it and 500,000 didn't, it's still like, wow, fucking 500,000 people agreed with me. I thought no one agreed with me. And, it's hard to have perspective on how other people feel about something unless it's like extremely popular. And even then, I've had so many conversations with people where they hear about a band that I like and they're like, I can't believe you like Coheed and Cambria. I didn't think anybody liked them. And it's like, buddy, they they've played on the radio, they've played in like major concert venues, they have fan sites dedicated to them. Of course other people like this band, but at the same time, if you and your experience never ran into anybody who'd heard of this thing that you liked and then suddenly do, yeah, I get why that's surprising and why you're like, excited about it. So that was kind of how I felt about the SAO thing. Was like, I was in a position of having spent like a year and a half in the Brony fandom, and like as an anime blogger, no one was watching SAO. It was seen as like normie stuff. You know, like nobody was watching Naruto in the anime blogosphere because there were whole websites dedicated to talking about Naruto. It wasn't necessary. But when SAO came out, it was kind of like that. It was like, well, the deep tier anime people aren't writing about it. So all I heard about it was like the gushing positivity of my fan base who had largely only seen that anime. So like finding out that there was a counter-cultural like anti-tide for that show that I kind of like activated and made into like a whole thing a bunch of people took advantage of and rode on the wave of, like, that was an exciting discovery, and it ended up feeling journalistic to me because it ended up feeling like I had revealed something like culturally that people hadn't picked up on, that like no one had noticed that people had noticed this show was bad, but nobody had put it into words or figured out why or expressed it or made it into a cultural moment that like there is a dispassion towards this thing, you know, caused by the overabundance of discussion that it got from its initial, you know, spring of popularity. So yeah, even without approaching it in like the most formally journalistic way, I think my work almost inevitably ends up becoming journalistic. It ends up having some kind of social impact. It ends up, you know, saying something about the way things are, even if it's just because I am a reflection of the way things are in my own existence or my own tendencies and stuff like that. So, yeah, that pretty much answers that. I've got another super chat here from Night Otaku with a K, $10. Thank you. Is this the answer? Oh, talk about this extinction. Learning refers to the gradual decrease in response to a conditioned stimulus that occurs when the stimulus is presented without reinforcement. Okay, I need to read that again. Hold on. Is this the answer? Oh, talk about this. Okay. Is this the answer? Oh, talk about this. Extinction learning refers to the gradual decrease in response to a conditioned stimulus that occurs when the stimulus is presented without reinforcement. Okay. So basically how if the same thing keeps happening, you have less and less response to it. And that's called extinction learning. That's interesting. I didn't know that. Yeah, I mean, like, if you keep hearing the same noise over and over again, it just means less and less. You have less and less reaction to it. I definitely think that's kind of just the way that the mind works. I will say personally, like, the more the same stimulus comes through me again and again, the less I notice. And so, like, there has to be some kind of shake-up, some kind of change to make it slightly different than the last time, even if it's just a state of mind change. Like, I'm even thinking about like watching an anime, right? Like, you can watch something so many times that you get tired of it, or it becomes rote, or like you can't listen to the words anymore because you're predicting them too much. But then you start like hearing your own voice in your head saying the words over the words, or like you just hear something else. You just find some other way to experience that within your own head if it's too repetitive. At least for me, like, I just will start creating that difference within my head if it doesn't exist within the stimulus itself. And even then there's a limit to how much you can, you know, how long you can keep doing the exact same thing and trying to imagine that it's something different. But yeah, like, I'm interested in that extinction learning concept. Let's head back to the Patreon here. Rant about it. Thanks. I have seen Kashimashi Girl Meets Girl. Man. Kashimashi Girl Meets Girl. I'm tempted to call it trans, but it's kind of not. Hold on, let me check my stream and make sure it's healthy right now, because I just started getting a loading circle on myself. Nope, I'm still up. Okay. Yeah, Kashimashi Girl Meets Girl. Oh man, it's so. The plot is a high school boy gets hit by a spaceship and turns into a girl. He has a girl body now. I was interested in watching this show because as a teenager who was first realizing, like, before I had the words for it, that I was trans, I was watching lots of shows that involve gender bender themes and especially Yuri themes. So I was watching this because it's a show about a guy turning into a girl and then becoming a lesbian, as I understood it. Actually, though, like, the character's experience of becoming a woman just isn't very, like, fleshed out. Like, it's not believable. He becomes like a moe girl, and it's also kind of like more of a comical victimization type thing than, like, it just feels very insincere, or at least very, like, naive in the way that it approaches the idea of the guy becoming a girl. And so there's two girls who are interested in the main character. One of them is, like, anti-men to the point, I don't even know if it was because, I don't know if it's because she's anti-men that she has this condition, or she has this condition and it has made her anti-men. But the idea is that this character can't see men's faces, or I can't see them at all. They're, like, blurry. Like, when she looks at men, she just sees, like, a blurry blob, and so she's, like, nervous and afraid of them. Whereas the main character was, like, the one guy that she kind of could look at, or, like, felt somewhat comfortable around, but now that he's a girl, it's even easier. I think they had, like, there was, like, Yuri implication, at least by the end of this show, but I don't remember them, like, hooking up. I don't remember if he gets turned back into a guy and she's just, like, okay with it. There was another girl who I just remember being a bitch. It's just not that good. Yeah, it was a show that I watched all of because it was a gender bender Yuri themed comedy, but it was one of the worst ones that I watched. So I can't really recommend it or say it's good. I don't know if you like it and that's why you recommended it, or if you just wanted to rant about it. Maybe you hate it and that's why you want to rant about it. In any case, it's benign. It's not the worst thing you could possibly read. And I'm almost out of rant requests. I got one from Marcus here. He says, rant about representations of non-Japanese Asian people in anime. Thank you for all your hard work, Trixie. You know, anime, it's come a long way, and it really depends on the show. Japan is not very shy about, like, racist humor and about really just edgy humor in general, especially anime. And you gotta remember, a lot of anime is late night, otaku driven, autistic media that's not really meant for mainstream people to ever encounter. So I'm sure that a lot of, like, the edgy comedy that comes out of Japan isn't just, like, accepted by everybody, and probably does have some controversy around it. But, like, there's lots of comedy anime that have just, like, ruthlessly racist portrayals of people from other Asian countries, or from America, or from anywhere else in the world. They just tend to very much genericize people down to the most obvious, like, stereotypes. And it really is because Japan is I'm not going to call it, like, a total monoculture, but there's, like, it's not exactly multicultural. There's not a tons of different races running around. It's mostly Japanese people. There are multiple races of Japanese people, but it's a pretty dominant, like, cultural similarity. So, like, their understanding, I mean, it's a fucking island in the middle of the Pacific, so it's not like they have tons of opportunity for bleed between other cultures, especially historically. But even now, as their culture has grown, like, the average Japanese person just doesn't have that much exposure to people from other countries outside of their culture. Their cultural imports, I mean to say. Speaking as an American, I've met foreigners fairly commonly throughout my life, people who just traveled or moved to wherever I'm from, especially being from Virginia Beach, which is, like, a tourist town in the first place and a military town. So, like, I've always been used to people of all different races, all different nationalities being around, and seeing how nobody is close to the stereotypes that are out there. And like a lot of anime, especially more like dramatic or serious ones, will just present characters of other nationalities as just another character who's not like goofy different in some way. Like Yuri on Ice would be a great example of like most of the characters are international. None of them acts like a fucking stereotype. A couple of them act like gay stereotypes, but that's because they're figure skaters. Meanwhile, like G Gundam is a show where deliberately every character and Gundam is like as emphatically stereotypical as they could be to represent their country, to the point of like high comedy. I would say like there's the trope of like Chinese characters who like speak in broken Japanese. You see more of that with English characters, but you see it in both cases. I'm thinking now of Shampoo from Rambo 1/2 is probably like the most racist Chinese accented character in anime that I could think of. The Filipino race, the only thing I can really think of that I consider like racist, but again, it's for comedy, is in Sayonara Zetsubo Sensei, when there's the whole bit about Maria and all of the refugees that live in her house, when it's like 20 people who've like all fled from the Philippines living inside like a tiny apartment. Yeah, it's mean. It's a mean-spirited stereotype used for humor. So I'd say they've had some pretty cruel ones. Mike Hunt with another Australian $5 says, manga versions of anime like Gantz, Naruto, Blade of the Immortal are often superior. It bothers me that people don't recognize this. Rant on my behalf. I think it's pretty uncommon for people not to know that the manga is generally better than the anime. I think most people who stick to anime adaptations just don't like manga. I love manga. I'm just not nearly as drawn to it as anime because manga is a very active process of reading, and I like to feel completely engaged with that process from start to end. It's kind of like playing a video game for me, where when I play a video game, I'll just sit down and beat the game in a couple days. I never want to like sit there and pick away at it for like a month. I feel the same way about manga. When I get excited about a manga, I just want to read the whole thing. And if I start getting excited, but I can't read the whole thing, I'm going to forget about it. So, like, it's difficult for me to work, especially currently running manga or extremely long-running manga, into my life. A lot of these have decent adaptations that, your specific selections here. Gantz. The original Gantz anime is not that great. I know it covers very little of the story. The manga looks incredible. I've met people who love the Gantz movie, particularly the CG one. There's also live-action Gantz movies. Like, there's parts of it that people have had strong positive reactions to, regardless of the manga's existence. And you kind of would hope that like most of those people would go read the manga if they like the other thing, knowing how much longer it is and how much farther it goes. Naruto, I don't know about in what way the anime is like particularly worse than the manga, like without all the filler or like some of the jank, because I don't know that the manga is particularly incredible in the first place. I haven't read that much Naruto, so forgive me for speaking out of turn if you think it's really awesome, but I don't really know if I could recommend the Naruto manga or anime. Blade of the Immortal, I actually think the new adaptation is fucking sick. The Hiroshi Hamasaki adaptation. The original one from B-Train sucked, but the newer one... Now, granted, I have not read all of Blade of the Immortals. This is another case where you've got like a really long-running manga. I don't think the anime did the whole story. If it did, it probably skipped a lot. But, it went on for a long time, and it's really beloved. The art style of the manga is crazy. There's lots of, like, just pencil work and ink work mixed together. Especially for reading in English, there's panels that were flipped by the author, like, just redrew panels for the sake of, like, the English-speaking release, or like flipped certain ones. So it's a weird read. It's got some gorgeous artwork. It's got lots of really fucked up, crazy ideas. I don't know if, from what I've seen of the anime, which is like the first half, that I think the manga's better. I think I got more drama out of watching the Hiroshi Hamasaki anime than I did out of reading the manga. So I don't know if I completely agree with you. But I still again think people should read that manga, should read all of these manga, because they are good. And I mean, if you like the anime adaptation, there's every reason to think that you're going to like the original. So, it would be weird to me, I guess, if people were like in the headspace of, like, I'm not gonna read the fucking manga, even though you already liked the show. Well, I'm about out of rant requests. I'm going to give people a minute if anybody wants to send me any more rant requests through the super chats while we're here. I'm currently in the process of uploading my big announcement video that I've been talking about all month. So that's going to be premiering just a little bit later tonight. So I'm kind of hoping to keep this live stream going for a little longer so that you guys can hop right from that into the other thing. Even if you're fucking tired, even if it's 4 a.m., you got to stick it out a little longer. But, I need rant requests, so I have something to talk about. That's going to take a while to render and upload. Otherwise, you'll see it in the morning. Hyped. Lux. Good to know. Alrighty. Okay, here we go. Alright. Ooh. Alright, I've got a request here to make a tier list on my favorite HBO shows based on my recent comments about them being higher art than most things and what I mean by that. Alright. So, I'm gonna head on over. Oh wait, I've got several new rant requests. I'll get to those in a second. Let me go to this. I'm going to see if I can find a tier maker for HBO shows. HBO shows. Alright, how many of these have I actually seen? I've never seen Girls, or Silicon Valley, or Insecure, or Ballers, or Animals, or Big Little Lies, or Boardwalk Empire, or True Detective, or The Night Of, or The Sopranos, or Gentleman Jack, or Sex and the City, or 6 Feet Under. I've seen the first few episodes of Westworld. So far, I would say it's good shit. It's a really trippy fucking show to watch because it takes place in kind of like an out of order, like anachronic storytelling, but also like most of the characters are robots who are reenacting the same scenario every day. And so sometimes you're just like watching that scenario play out again and again, but with like slight differences based on how other people react to it. And then other times you're just like watching characters who aren't in the scenario, but are like metatextually watching the evolution of it or like trying to keep it on track. So like bouncing between the different characters and situations, it's a lot to process, especially in the early episodes. And you could feel all these crazy mysteries building up, but it's mostly just like the setting and concept that really gets the noggin jogging, and the show is incredibly well made, which I can say about pretty much all of these. Game of Thrones. I've only seen the first 4 episodes of Game of Thrones, and first 4 seasons rather, I meant. And I've heard that the later stuff really goes downhill. Frankly, at first, when this show came out, like, I wasn't somebody who could handle like really dark or tragic media, so I was kind of avoiding it because it was like my impression was like, oh, why would I get invested in these characters if they're all just gonna die? Then I happened to, independently of anything, just see the Red Wedding scene when my mom was watching it for the first time, and it was so badass, just the way it was presented, that I was like, well, now I've got to see who all these people were that I just watched die. So me and my brother went back and marathoned the first 3 seasons, and I ended up thoroughly enjoying it, but part of it was because I knew everything that was going to happen. Like, I'd been spoiled to all the twists. I wasn't, like, afraid, so I could handle more of the darkness, even though there were certain scenes that still, like, kind of fucked me up. When you got to season 4, I felt like the production values had reached, like, peak, and it looked really great, but the... every season they would add in more and more content to pad out the time that you spend with, like, the really popular characters, and also the violence kept getting more extreme. And the way that they did Oberyn in season 4, I was really unhappy about and really traumatized with. And, even though I thought the last episode of the season was badass, I just didn't come back for season 5. I couldn't emotionally handle it anymore. And when people told me that the show, like, every season people told me it got worse, so I just was like, well, I feel nothing about having jumped off where I did. I feel like I got out while the getting was good. So, from what I saw, I'm tempted to call it almost Chef's Kiss, but I'm going to have to put it in good shit as a category. The categories on this tier list, by the way, are Chef's Kiss, good shit, once is enough, on the watch list, or could care less. So anything I haven't seen, I would just put on the watch list, or could care less. But I can't really make distinctions about the shows I don't know anything about, which is most of them. I've seen the first 6 episodes of Euphoria. I would definitely put that... It's either good shit or Chef's Kiss. It's pretty close to being incredible. I really like the characters. I love the presentation. The whole vibe of the show. To me, this is like the zeitgeist show of the Zoomer generation. It's like the perfect snapshot of, being a young adult right now, or even maybe like the last 10 years, maybe 10 years ago, in a way that, like, there's been plenty of shows that are sort of like this show, but about past generations, and this is the one that, like, connects with me on the level of, like, oh, I know people who are like this. But at the same time, it's somewhat meandering. It's not a show that has, like, a strong central thrust of where it's going and why. So I would say that it's not perfect, but it's really good. Curb Your Enthusiasm, also fucking hilarious show. I've seen a lot of it because my parents were big fans, and my brother's a big fan. He's watched it a bunch of times. Larry David is a funny dude, and the improv is great. The cringe comedy of this show, honestly, the main reason I haven't seen more of Curb Your Enthusiasm is it is kind of hard to watch. It is so cringe that it can be really hard to, like, even, emotionally deal with watching how badly Larry David fucks up his life all the time. So, yeah, that's that one I would put in good shit. The Wire, Chef's Kiss, miraculous. I still haven't finished it, because once again, I got too depressed about halfway through season 3. But it's the most, like, cleverly written, the most, like, just incisive fucking deconstruction of, like, just what life is like in the most harrowing parts of the United States, specifically in this case Baltimore. It shows you how people are surviving or not in, like, the most difficult parts of a society that we are ostensibly a part of, that, like, I've lived my whole life fucking within 5 hours of Baltimore, and it's fascinating to see, like, what life could be if you just are born under, like, the wrong circumstances or in the wrong neighborhood, to find yourself in this endless cat and mouse game of cops and drug dealers. So that's, like, the best HBO show that I've seen. I would also give a chef's kiss to Entourage, which was the first live action show I ever really got heavily into. I mostly watched it because it's like a cool bromance about just, 4 fun dudes who like to hang out and do fun stuff. The older I get, like rewatching the show recently, I really understood, like, what actually it's saying about its characters and its world and like presenting about Hollywood. You know, like this show is like my first real glance into how things are made, like how people get the opportunities they do, how a fucking a celebrity lives, like how does an actor get their roles, how do they become famous, how do they navigate the environment of what they do. You know, this show is very revealing of all that, and it's got a fun cast of characters. So yeah, it's a very watchable show. I think, I don't know if it's quite Chef's Kiss, but it might be close. Big Love I've actually seen a few episodes of. It was alright. I'd probably put that in, I wouldn't say once is enough in that I haven't even gotten through the whole show once, but if I had watched it once, I probably wouldn't feel the need to watch it again. I remember thinking it was okay. It's about Mormons. And then Watchmen, I've only seen the first like episode and a half, maybe 2 episodes. I don't remember if I watched 2 whole episodes of it. It's really fucking cool to look at. It's got crazy set design. The world concept is just fucking a lot to wrap your head around. It's the kind of show that like has such a particularly imagined universe that like when I went back into it to watch another episode, it was like I had to reconnect all the dots of like what even the fuck is going on in this show. I don't know how it got made. Sincerely, I don't know how they were allowed to make a show as complicated as that, but I'm fascinated with it, so I'm glad it exists. And that's pretty much how I'd rank all the HBO shows that are in that tier maker. Now I'm going to get to these super chats that I've gotten while I was stalling. Lucky is free with $5, says, rant about Donald Glover's Atlanta. Atlanta is my favorite live action show, actually. Even more than all those HBO shows I just mentioned. It's a surreal, absurdist, dark comedy about a guy played by Donald Glover who he's really smart, but basically just wants to flow along life. Like he just doesn't seem to be somebody who can like sit around and be put in a box and do things people tell him. He doesn't really is not the type to work or go to school. He dropped out of school and like kind of wanders around between whoever will help him out. And in the first episode, he finds out that his cousin, who is a rapper going by the name Paperboy, has just had a sudden like a song that is bumping all over the hood. So he's like, how did you get everybody listening to this song? I like it. I'm going to try to get it onto the radio. So he does. He manages to get it onto the radio, and Paperboy becomes a rapper, and his career starts taking off. And so it's all about Donald Glover's character managing this rapper Paperboy, and also their friend, who's always around, Darius, who his head is completely up in the clouds, and it's hard to understand what he's saying a lot of the time, but he understands hustle and long-term investment better than anybody, and basically keeps everything flowing around Paperboy. So yeah, these 3 characters, all of them are just like a fucking blast to watch, all perfectly acted. Zazie Beetz also is perfect in the show as Donald Glover's character's girlfriend, baby mama. She's a teacher. She has one of the best episodes when her and her sister hang out. Each episode really is like its own contained universe. Like they all have such a different concept that like when I think about the show, I'm really picturing each and every episode individually and what it was about, and they're all just executed so fucking well. The show has like a horror tinge. Like the surrealness creates this like odd, unnerving atmosphere a lot of the time. So I guess I would call it like a horror comedy in that sense. Particularly the second season was leaning more and more into horror, and I haven't watched the 3rd yet. I know they've got a 4th that's like already shot and to be released at some point. But yeah, I haven't gotten to season 3. It's one of those things where when you know you're gonna like something a certain amount, it becomes scary to actually have seen it. Even season 2 was like that for me. I don't remember watching it until it was like over because I was scared of having to anticipate it week after week. But yeah, it's incredibly good. I have seen the whole first 2 seasons a couple times, and it's the kind of show that, like, I guess I have the strongest reaction I had to that I had since Rick and Morty. Like, Rick and Morty had a really visceral, like, wow, this show is written for somebody who feels and thinks like me, and I could watch it over and over again. And Atlanta was like the next show that gave me that feeling. So yeah, shout out to that great show. Next up, Mike Hunt with $5 says Naruto takes 3 minutes to read a chapter. They stretch it to full 20 minutes in the anime. It's why the JoJo anime was perfect. They mashed chapters together. Yeah, I get that. I would say One Piece is even worse about that, where in One Piece it'll, like, a chapter is usually it's only 16 minutes really, because they put so much intro and outro and like recap and stuff in order to get it out. And then yeah, they make sure that it takes as long as it could for everything to happen. So I get why that would fuck with the timing and make it just a more difficult experience. I certainly, have preferred the manga for pretty much any long-form shonen adaptation. But again, you got to remember the anime has music, it has color, it has motion, it has voice. There's lots of stuff that people will grab onto and that will make them care about a story a lot more in animation than there is in manga. So again, I get why the anime ends up being more popular most of the time, is that it's got more hooks with which to grab you than the manga. But the manga just does what it does better usually than the anime does any individual aspect of what it does. All right, next up, V-Nerd with $5. History of gunplay in anime. Wow. I mean, that's a deep topic, and I have not done like research or a research paper on it, so I'll do my best. And when you say gunplay, I'm like thinking, do you mean like history of how it's animated, or like how people use guns in anime? I've seen lots of old shows where it's pretty much just like stiff arm, gun in hand, go blat, laser come out, arm doesn't even like move. It's just like laser come out of gun. That's that like hyper limited old school style. When you get to the 70s, there's lots of big pose into gun shoot. So like, character might do like a cool spin and then like an extreme pose and then shoot the gun. Space Adventure Cobra also comes to mind, where he had like the arm for a gun, so he's always doing some kind of cool like Samus type poses. So then you get to like the 80s and there's lots of big robots, and you got more like the machine guns, a lot more of the like rocket launchers over the shoulder, like hot chick pulls out rocket launcher, aim fire type shit. And then I really want to say like late 90s, early 2000s was when we got a lot more of like the gun kata type shit of like, two characters with two guns each having a shootout across from each other. Trigun is a big time gunplay anime. Cowboy Bebop's big into gunplay. Fucking Hellsing. So I just think there was like an era, like late 90s, we went through a big time like, yeah, everybody's gonna fight with guns and be badass about it. And so like when Adult Swim started up, and a lot of those were the shows that we got, I do think, man, now that I'm thinking about it, that's probably a big part of why anime was able to crack the West, is they finally started playing with handguns more. Because, handguns aren't a common sight to Japanese people, and they're not nearly as common to Japanese media as they are to American media. But yeah, it makes sense that, like, the most iconic, the first really, like, iconic TV anime to break Adult Swim would be, like, Spike Spiegel's flipping that fucking gun around and posing with it. So yeah, I would say that like anime gunplay probably reached its height around then. We got a lot of the Girls with Guns shows, Noir, fucking Ghost in the Shell counts. There was Gunslinger Girl when you get to like 2006. Like the whole early 2000s was tons and tons and tons of guns, especially Girls with Guns, especially action scenes involving gunplay. Now it has toned down a lot more, but it does pop up here and there. And I tend to find it funny when like a show that doesn't otherwise have guns like suddenly involves a gunfight, and usually like the way the animation changes to accommodate that ends up looking really funny. There's some kind of show right now that has some pretty dope like gunplay scenes that keeps getting posted on Twitter by like Kevin the animation expert, but yeah, I would say that's pretty much my history of Gunplay. I had more to say about that than I fucking anticipated when I read that request. I'll tell you that. Next up is Mike Hunt with Australian $2. My Little Pony peeing is magic. Best hentai ever. Is that a rant request or just a statement? I've never heard of it. I believe you. Mike Hunt with another Australian $2. Game of Thrones peaks at season 4. Good call. Yeah, I pretty much figured. You know, watching Tyrion fucking crossbow his dad was pretty much the high watermark of like dramatic storytelling. I think part of it also is that like by that point in the story, most of the characters I liked were dead or had become less interesting. So it was kind of like, all right, well, who am I even rooting for at this point? Like, fuck it. Yeah, they really fucked up that one. All right. Anonymous with $5. Rant about how Gabby Brown is an irredeemable blank star and deserves to get stepped on. Sasha deserved so much better. It took me a second to remember who you were talking about, and that's not a real person. I was like, what the fuck? Gabby Brown is great. I disagree. So if you don't know what we're talking about, in Attack on Titan, basically the entire show has taken place on an island where people with the potential to turn into Titans have been gathered. And meanwhile, back outside in a country called Marley, there are people who can turn into Titans who are specifically like raised as soldiers from childhood in order to fight in wars. And or not even that they can turn into them, that they're like given the power, like it's handed down to become one of the like 7 main Titans. So like each of these kids is like a candidate to become one of those, and Gabby is like the most ruthless, most fucking like in your face, murderous child soldier of them all. So like in the sense that she's a 12-year-old who was raised to do nothing but kill. Yeah, she's she's not really been put in a position to be redeemable. It would be hard to change the way that she is. We meet her as a murderer, as a person who fights in war. So, the fact that she kills a character that we like and are familiar with from what is supposed to be our team because, we watched them the whole show. I mean, did Sasha deserve much better, really? How many of Gabby's friends did Sasha kill? We're talking about murderers killing murderers here, all right? Nobody's really redeemable or comes out clean in Attack on Titan. Gabby was just doing what Gabby thought she had to do, and she's better now. I don't know that, actually. I haven't read the rest of the manga, and the anime doesn't reach the end of the manga, so it's hard to gauge. All right. If anybody else has any more rant requests, please let me know. Don't miss this new patron. I got a new patron. All right, let me go find this new patron message. Make sure I didn't already address this. Okay, there's people. Yeah, okay. Someone realized that they could send a message on Patreon during the stream, so that's perfect. This is from Rachel Nova Shogerath McKenna. Might I humbly request a rant about whichever of these subjects you are familiar with when you can? The phenomenon and taxonomy of the Tumblr sexy man, Yakuza games, or Oshiete Galko-chan. I hope this is how this works. I have never heard of the Tumblr sexy man. Hold on, let me go Google this exact phrase and see what I get. Tumblr sexy man. Just looks like sexy guys that are on Tumblr. I don't know enough about that to talk about it, but we'll go into Yakuza games and Oshiete Galko-chan. I've watched There was a video by a YouTuber called Hero called Your Next Favorite on Yakuza that had sold me on the idea that I would love the games. The fact that they're just kind of about like hanging out in the city, doing fun shit and beating people up and like watching a good story. All that appeals to me a lot. Having said that, they were very insistent that you like play the first game first. So I tried to do that. I was playing the first game on PS2, and I was enjoying it, but the load times are crazy in that game. And so it was the kind of thing where I was like, I want to like this, but it's like a little more dated than it's worth. And I know that there are people who think like the remakes change things or don't like them as much or whatever. I would rather play the remakes. I'll probably start there whenever I finally do like decide to play Yakuza. There's so many of the games also. That's troubling for me because I'm sure they tread a lot of the same ground, and I'm not interested in playing like 8 back-to-back games that are exactly the same. So like if there's one in specific that is considered to be like, this is the one you have to play regardless of whether you will ever play another one, I might check that one out. But I don't know if that exists. So... and as for Oshiete Galko-chan, so I liked this anime quite a bit. It was a series of like 7-minute episodes of just some high school girls sitting around talking about raunchy subjects that real girls talk about, but most shows don't even address it. They're talking about the periods, talking about the nipple sizes, just having, like explorative conversations as they try to understand themselves and their world better. And the main like theming of the show is around the fact that the main character Galko looks like a gyaru, like a stylish, haughty girl who would be like kind of a bitch, but she's actually super nice and everybody loves her, and she is very conscientious and kind. And then she has a friend, Otako, who's the otaku girl who's kind of like pouty and seethy about things, but ultimately she sees the good in Galko and is friends with her, and they are able to connect. So like the characters are cool. There's a third girl, I'm struggling to remember her name. She's just like the Ojo-chan, like rich girl, kind of out of it. Color design is really good. The original manga looks like it's drawn with ballpoint pens in different colors, which is a really neat aesthetic, and it's fun. I enjoyed reading the first volume of the manga just as much as I had the anime. Unfortunately, I recently learned that the creator of Oshiete Galko-chan, not unlike the creator of Rurouni Kenshin, was caught with a bunch of child pornography. So Rurouni Kenshin, that was one where after I found out, I went back and I went, there's a lot of prepubescent girls in this story, positioned as like love interests and stuff. It's set in a time period when that was like a thing. It's a little sus. When you find out that the guy who wrote Galko-chan has child pornography, then you're just like, damn. I can't look at this the same way. I can't look at what your intentions were here the same way as I did before I knew what I wouldn't have even probably thought that a man had written this manga. I don't even know if it was a man, actually. I shouldn't even assume. I just read that the author had child pornography. That's a shame. It's no fun. Nobody likes when a manga that they enjoy turns out to be written by an active pedophile collecting child porn physically in their house. Yeah, that sucks. But hey, what can you do? Alright, that was my new patron rant request. If anybody else is a patron who didn't realize that they could DM me or doesn't know how yet, I'm giving you a little bit more time. And also, if anybody wants to super chat me any rant requests, I'm still waiting on my big announcement video to render and upload that I'm going to be debuting. As soon as it's ready.
I would like to request, if I give you $5, could you talk about different anime styles and evolution throughout the periods of time?
Animation style evolution?
Yeah, like art styles.
Okay. So this is a rant request from Mint Salad to talk about different the evolution of anime art styles over time. So, man, I mean, I'm gonna go all the way back to 1917, because in the beginning, a lot of the animation looked like, just because of the way it looked like it was on a light box. Like, usually it looks like someone moving paper, like cut out pieces of paper up and down across, like a light box, like the way that that South Park is animated. Like, a lot of the stuff is, maybe just because it's so stiff, I'm thinking like, I can't remember the name of it. If you go and look up like anime that was released before the 1960s, there's a great archive site that has just like most of the extant animated films that like people know about from before 1960. And like a lot of stuff was lost in fires and shit and earthquakes over the years, especially from the early years of animation. But like, yeah, the super early stuff, a lot of it feels closer to like a picture book or like a slideshow theater than like traditional animation. And then the stuff that is animated, like the first one that I've seen that was like mind-blowingly animated is probably Kumo and Tulip, or Spider and Tulip. It's just like a short about, it's very like Disney-esque, and it's just like cute foresty creatures having a kind of fantastical little adventure. Yeah, I would say that like the more Disney-like stuff and the more Western influenced stuff started to come in throughout the first half of the 20th century. And then like there comes a point when, to me, like anime as we know it as like a commercial medium really just kind of like starts in the 50s when Toei decided they were going to be Japanese Disney. And so Toei is like, we're going to crank out a fucking fully fledged animated feature every year. Most of them are based on folk tales. Most of them have like some kind of central iconic character that could be used for marketing. So like it really was their attempt to like make Disney films year after year. And I don't think they were as like exquisitely animated as Disney films, but they're definitely carrying more of that aesthetic vibe of like, the intention is to be fully animated. There are some scenes that are like animated on ones or that have like more fluidity. It's still cheaper than most Disney movies would have probably looked by that point. But it's nonetheless like, again, the intention is to make highbrow traditional animation. And then when you hit Astro Boy and Osamu Tezuka, who's like, hey, I want to fucking adapt this manga into like a long ass sustainable television series, how can we make that possible? That's when they really developed the super limited animation style of like, all right, we're just going to like adapt the panels to animation, and then like if the panel is a car going down the road, we'll just draw 4 drawings of it slowly progressing, and it'll be like movement. It's not quite moving like fluidly, but it looks like movement. And so and I actually think like the Astro Boy cartoon looks really good. Like aesthetically it looks good. It's just very limited in the animation style. And I do think part of that was just technique. It was people, like not enough animators with not enough experience or education to like have, like a lot of different art styles or more realism in the way certain things move. Like over time, people have just constantly developed new techniques that get ripped off by other people for like how to animate a thing, how to conceptualize the way a thing should look moving, or how an emotion would be conveyed through the way a thing looks moving. So, the hyper limited style, it started to evolve, and like getting into the 70s when things got colorful and stylized, I feel like anime was always more focused on like character design and about the prettiness of individual frames. It was always about like, if we're not going to have the most fluid animation, we can at least have the most impact in each individual image. So, in the same way that manga does, but with, with the addition, like, it's basically manga plus. Like manga, but what else can we do before it gets too expensive and becomes fully fledged animation? And then I really think it was like the emergence of animators like Yoshinori Kaneda that created what anime would become by looking at like that number of frames and saying like, well, what if instead of like a choppy version of a fluid motion, it was just like a totally fucking extreme difference between the frames of this limited motion. So like the Kaneda style is like, a character doing a jump kick might go between a frame of a character jumping and a frame of a character posed in a jump kick, and in a way that there's like one in between to make it feel more like motion, but it's the drama and the instantaneousness of it that catches your attention more than that it like looks realistic or fluid. And so as more and more people started doing that like hyper stylized version of limited animation, I think that's where like the 80s style kind of started to be defined. And again, there's still plenty of people doing the more realistic stuff, and like if you're following like Mamoru Oshii and the stuff that he's directing in his career, it's all going to look like hyper literal and real with this like surreal tint in how it's presented as film. But like, his point is realism in the animation and artistry, and he's going to hire the animators who are the most capable of making things look the most real. Whereas, some Studio Trigger, while they'll, different shows, they'll do different things. But like, if you're looking at like a Imaishi show who is directly trying to like further the Kaneda style of animation and like push that to the furthest extremes he can, that's where they're taking like, now we have the technology that we can do the crazy limited thing and the crazy fluid thing at the same time. Like we can make limited fluid animation. We can make like whole new technological styles. If you've ever seen Promare, you can kind of understand what I'm trying to imply. So like, when I think about the evolution of anime history, I really do see it as like the history of trying to figure out how to make the most with a little. Akiyuki Shinbo and Studio Shaft did it by way of just really fucking outlandish compositions. They're like, nothing's going to be animated, but every shot is going to look so different from the last and so different from any shot you've ever seen that you'll definitely remember it and want to watch it again. Whereas, other shows are really just kind of going for like as much as they can get away with. They're just like, hey, we just need you to be able to understand what's happening. And like, hopefully it looks kind of stylized. But yeah, for the most part, anime history is just about figuring out how to stretch that dollar to the furthest extent that you can. And that's pretty much the evolution of anime art styles over the years. I'm still waiting on more rant requests for a minute here. So waiting on my big announcement video to finish rendering. It's over there. It's over there mocking me with its being at 100% but not quite done. You ever have that happen? Your program's like 100%. You're like, but 100% means done. So why are you still going? Ancient Chinese secret. Did anyone see that ninja run past just now? I saw that. I saw that fucking Naruto-ass ninja over there running around. Now I'm actually reading the chat. A lot of people praying that the Made in Abyss author won't fall into the same category. Yeah, I hope so. I mean, there's lots and lots of people drawing lolly out there. I hope all of them aren't looking at child porn, but it's never who you expect, right? It's never whoever seems obvious. It's always you're like, oh shit, in retrospect, yeah, that could have been obvious. Lolly Shota stuff is eyebrow raising. Actual CP is irredeemable though. I agree. I absolutely agree with that statement as it was made. Going back through chat to see what you guys have been talking about. My thoughts on season 3 when I watch it of I don't remember what I was talking about that had. Oh, not Game of Thrones. Oh, Atlanta. Yeah. Yeah, I can't wait to watch that. You thought the recommendation video was the big announcement thing? It kind of dovetails into it. If you've already watched that, you'll understand what I mean when this video comes out. But yeah, the that was not the big announcement. That was just another part of Vlogust, another video I was doing. This one is also we're technically a little overtime on August, but my sleep schedule is not the same as a normal person's. I don't view the day the same way other people do, so we're just at a little bit of overtime. But next month I'll be doing another one of these Rant live streams for anybody who patrons me and anybody who ends up donating during the stream, as always. It's a shame that I did this stream on the 1st, though, because all the money I make from it I won't see until the 21st of October, as opposed to the 21st of this month. But, it is what it is. I thank everybody who's been donating, including Sausage Man, who just sent me $5. Said, rant about ocean waves. I remember as Digi you said it was one of your favorite Ghiblis, but it's easily the worst to me outside of the 3D one I haven't seen. Okay, so I'm sure if I watched Ocean Waves right now, I probably would agree that it was one of the least interesting Ghibli films. That's not a huge condemnation because most of them are fucking incredible. Most of them are like mind-blowing experiments that no one could ever run. Like, only Hayao Miyazaki and Isao Takahata could ever have made any of the films that they did. Hiromasa Yonebayashi's films are great too, but they're not so like impossible as a lot of those other ones are. So, like, if we're talking, is Ocean Waves as good as The Wind Rises or Princess Mononoke? No, it's not even in the same category. It's a made-for-TV movie. It's not even a theatrical film. I believe it was directed by Tomomi Mochizuki. Can't remember how to say his name, but he's, like, generally pretty good at writing very low-key human drama in anime form. He wrote, like, Here is Greenwood. He did that one baseball show with the trans kid from a couple years ago. I never got to see all of. It's like he's a good writer-director. He's done good work in the genre of like slice of lifey, semi-dramatic, like often kind of cutesy, low-key, low-tempo stuff. So like Ocean Waves for his catalog makes perfect sense. It's right on brand for the kind of thing he does. It's less on brand for Studio Ghibli. And like I understand how it could have gotten made around a time when they were doing like Only Yesterday and like these more humane, like low-key drama films. Ocean Waves has no fantasy in it. It has no sci-fi. It has no like crazy visuals. It's mostly realistic. It's about like college students, or I think it's about actually a high schooler, and then it skips to like 10 years later or something like that. It's just like it's like a normal ass movie. It does feel like a TV drama. It's very like nostalgic. It's about like characters finding themselves and coming into young adulthood and coming of age. When I watched this film, I was, I think, 17 or 18 and like about to graduate high school. I was in the emotional state to see this film. I was exactly where I needed to be as like a person to understand and relate to the characters and what they were going through at least parts of the movie. I remember being emotionally affected by it and giving it a 10 out of 10 and considering it my favorite Ghibli film when I watched it. When I watched it, I was not a Ghibli fan. I did not like or understand most of Hayao Miyazaki's films that I had seen. They were over my head, or I had seen them when I was so much younger that I couldn't really remember them at the time. So it wasn't like crazy competition for my favorite Ghibli film back then. And also, like, again, most of what I was into at the time was like YA coming of age stories. Like, this is a time where like F: A Tale of Memories became one of my favorite anime for a while. So like, in terms of falling in with like the kinds of stuff I was watching and the emotional state I was in, yeah, it was the perfect Ghibli film for me at 17. I don't remember if I've ever watched it again since. I am sure I would not give it a 10 out of 10 or consider it one of the best Ghiblis if I saw it today. I just know that from even my vague memory of the movie. Because, again, I know it can hit in a certain way, but it's not an impossible masterpiece the way most of the Ghibli films are. But that's a high standard to try to reach. And I by no means think the film is bad. Even if I saw it again and didn't like it, I wouldn't be able to say it's bad because I liked it so much the first time. So, you know, I'm not gonna sit here and like and begrudge something I know meant something to me at some point. But yeah, that's my thoughts on that movie. I will continue to sit and see if anybody else wants to send me more rant requests because so far it's been happening and I'm enjoying it. Let's see. Dazaki style is the height of making something relatively cheap look good. He definitely influenced the people like Shinbo the most. Like, people who really are trying to make every frame a painting. Or at least a cool piece of graphic art. You know, back then they literally were paintings, but the Shinbo era, the Shaft era of Shinbo at least, is more about like composition and digital coloring. I really want to see the announcement, but I'm also really tired. Will you be posting it as a separate video tomorrow? I will stay up a bit longer, but not much longer. Yeah, it's going to be a separate video. As soon as this live stream's over, it'll be, or rather, as soon as the video is done, because I don't know how long I can stretch the live stream for, and I don't know how long it's going to take for this video to be ready to be posted. But at the very least, yeah, it's going to be a separate video. And it will be the last video of Vlogust, and then I'm not gonna be posting for a bit, so you know you're definitely gonna want to see that. It's a big important video that will definitely catch your attention whenever you end up seeing it. Ainor says, I was just looking for the video. They did an interview for, or no, I don't know who you're talking about, but they did an interview tour for his house. One of the sus items was a bust model with a sailor uniform and a bra he was showing off, and maybe stuff on his. Okay, so this is about the sus. Oh, you're talking about Made in Abyss guy? Is that what it is? That he has weird shit? Well, hopefully it's not too weird. Mike Hunt with another Australian $2 says, Miyazaki is suspicious. A lot of panty shots in Kiki. Miyazaki is definitely suspicious. And so is Takahata. Let's be frank. Takahata never misses an opportunity to show a little girl naked in his movies. And yeah, Miyazaki, I mean, even before Kiki, like, when you watch, like, Panda Go Panda, girls' underwear are just constantly visible. Like he used to just, like, put little girls in, like, the little, like, the bundle underwear and just, like, never stop showing the underwear. And, yeah, it's always struck me as really odd. Like, it seems like the point is to show the characters in, like, a really unguarded way where, like, we're like, overly familiar or intimate with them, which is kind of creepy when you think about the fact that it's, you know, like, how do I connect you with this little girl character? I know, I will show you her underwear. It's like, oh, okay, there must have been another way. But yeah, it's very indicative of Miyazaki's style. If you don't know, Miyazaki's interest in animation began when he was, I believe, in high school, and he had no girlfriend, and he started going to the theater to see, I think it was Tale of the White Serpent, over and over again, because there's a cute girl in the movie, and she was his waifu. He literally just had a waifu, so he kept going to the movie theater to see this movie so that he could spend time with his fucking waifu. So then he created a bunch of waifus. Like, every single Miyazaki film is based around some young perfect girl who's always, like, obviously his ideal version of like what I mean. Nazca is literally fucking Jesus. She's just girl Jesus. It's just everything that he wanted a person to be. He put all of that into Nazca. And then most of his characters since then are like either some kind of splinter off of that character or something completely different. But like, yeah, I would say Miyazaki, he probably would never do anything to hurt a child. But he definitely wants to think of young women in a very unguarded sense. Mike Hunt with Australian $2. I reluctantly drew her with large breasts, quoting Miyazaki. Yeah, reluctantly. What is this? Sasha's Man saying, I could see it hitting as a coming-of-age story, and it had impressive cuts, but I just found the characters very unlikable for the most part. This is talking back about Ocean Waves. There's also an interesting YouTube video about how it could be interpreted or rewritten as a gay romance between the protagonist and his friend. I would have to watch that. I do remember there being like a really intense male relationship in the show, but I remember it being more of a bromance than a gay thing. But maybe bromance is just low-key gay thing every time. Princess Mononoke is literally a hippie goddess. Yeah, pretty much. That girl definitely don't shower. Not once. Good night, Trixie. Good night. FreeCreditReport.com. Alright. I am going to look through my Patreon messages one more time to see if anybody sent me a new message. They did not. So I've answered all the Patreon rant requests. If anybody else has anything else they want me to rant about, please send me $5 in a super chat and I'll rant about it. This is the last chance you're going to get for a little while. I don't have another live stream planned for the immediate future until next month. Until next month when I do the next big rant stream where I rant about whatever anybody wants me to for $5, especially my Patreon backers, especially the ones who remember to send me a DM with their rant request so that I can tell them whether or not I can do that rant request. And then do that rant request in the live stream. Mike Hunt with another Australian $5 says, Miyazaki only bothers me because of the hypocrisy. He seems to despise fan service and sexy anime in general. I think he just wants everybody to do it in his specific reserved way. Like I said, he shows all these panty shots and like it's never presented as sexual. It's always like weirdly reverent or again like trying to make you feel like more intimately connected to the character, but more in like a relating to them sense than like a wanting to fuck them. Like he never presents the characters as sex objects. He never presents them as someone that you want to have sex with. It's more like someone you want to protect and admire and help. And that's great. I think it's actually really strong characterization in writing. And not a lot of people have the like. I think what has made him so popular is that he presents the characters so admirably that like he takes these young girls and he wants them to be like the most badass, likable, heroic person they could be. And a lot of people stop short of creating like that heroic of a character or like thinking like trying to make someone as good as a Miyazaki character usually is. So yeah, I think it's more that he sees it as like, oh, if you really loved them, then you'd show them like the utmost respect in how you present them, and you wouldn't treat them as a sex object. You'd treat them as something better than that, something stronger than that. I think that's what he's going for, and why it's not quite hypocritical. It's more of like a taste thing, you know? It's more about like what he wants out of the presentation. Ross DC asks, how's Anime Alphabet coming along? There's going to be an update about that in my big announcement video. I'll talk about it. I'll touch on the state of it in that, along with the other things that I talk about in this big ol' announcement. The hype wave. Cutis is non-diegetic fan service kind of bothers me. That's why I couldn't get into Strike Witches. it bothers me in shows that aren't about fan service. Like when I'm watching Sword Art Online and it just gets tied up in Shion's ass, I'm like, this is supposed to be a serious scene. It would be different if it was more like Strike Witches, where the camera's just always in someone's ass, because I know I'm supposed to watch that show like for sexual content. And so I enjoy Strike Witches because it's exactly what it says on the tin. Like, the show is a sexually driven action show, you know? So like you get everything you're looking for all the time. Whereas like something like SAO will be like putting on the facade of just being like a regular show and then just slip that stuff in there like you're not, well, you know, knowing you're going to notice, but like it's not distracting, I guess is what I mean to say. Steves with another Australian $5 says, I am probably going to be the 100th person to ask it, but have you seen Giguk's AniTube history video? If so, what do you think about? Actually, you're not. You're the first person to directly ask, especially in rant form, if I had seen that. And the answer is no, I haven't watched the whole thing. I know I was mentioned in it. I seen the section where he sort of mentions me and Jeff Thu as like the popular faces of the anime analysis scene, which is interesting because like when I got into AniTube, like Giguk is the right person to have made this video because he's been around the longest as far as I can tell, as like a relevant person who's been talking about anime. When I started doing anime content, it was basically like just Giguk, Glass Reflections, and Holden Reviews were like the only even remotely relevant anime review channels that I could find. And Giguk was by far the biggest. And all of them had a podcast together, Podtaku. I didn't even find out about that till later through becoming friends with Nino, who had been on it. But yeah, like when I got into the scene, it was very few people. And I started doing anime content in the style that I would eventually blow up for in 2014. But it wasn't really until really early 2016 that I actually became like recognized as an anime YouTuber. Like I had some success. I was doing decently on Patreon, you know, through 2015, but I didn't grow that year. I was pretty statically, you know, getting like 10K a video or so or something like that throughout most of that year. It wasn't like crazy numbers until when I finished the Asterisk War Sucks series. That was a huge boost. And then when I did the big anime face video that's still my most popular, that was a huge boost. So around then, when I was really blowing up, is when Mother's Basement launched and started becoming popular as well, and we started collaborating together. So I definitely see how, from Giguk's perspective, I probably pretty much just appeared alongside Jeff in 2016, and we made anime analysis a thing. When from my perspective, it was like I'd been doing it for a while, and there were a bunch of channels that sprung up after me that just never got that big that they would be mentioned or recognized. Like Jeff is the biggest channel that was doing the closest thing to what I was doing as what you call anime analysis. And when the two of us started getting really popular doing that, it made everybody else change the way they were doing things to be a little bit closer to that. Just changed the meta. But I kind of ended up dipping out of being like really in that conversation. It's why I don't come up very much in the video, is that I saw that moment, like 2016, as year 3 of my YouTube career. You know, like a year of big My Little Pony blogging, a year and a half really, and then like a year and a half of steadily growing as an anime YouTuber, but not really popping in like a massive way. So like when I, you know, blinked onto people's radar as big AniTuber, was around the time that like, yeah, like a bunch of people who were doing something similar or who had been directly inspired by me were also starting to get more popular at that same time. But I kind of threw it away not too long after that by being generally uncooperative and really wanting to do my own thing, like not wanting to be involved in AniTube, not wanting to be you know, a part of those broader conversations, because I was too busy trying to figure out like what I really wanted to do with my life outside of doing that kind of content. So you know, I kind of drifted away, and I understand why, like, you know, I didn't maintain the energy of I'm one of the biggest Anitubers and that's my thing. It was like I happen to be one of the biggest Anitubers, but I'm just doing whatever the fuck I want, and eventually I stopped being one of the biggest Anitubers. I just cannot say that about myself anymore. So yeah, it's interesting just to know how much and how little I matter to anime YouTube history by seeing how much space I occupy in the way it's described by Giguk. It's exciting to have been mentioned, but it's also kind of like, ah, man, I could have done so much more. I could have been so much more important to this story if I had wanted, or if I had understood how at the time. I have another super chat here from Assailant LF with $10. Wait, I think I skipped something. Yep, hold on. I'll get to you in a second. Mike Hunt with Australian $5 first had said, Gantz would have had more mainstream appeal like Naruto. I think he meant Gantz. If it simply toned down the violence and breast size, but he said, I'll draw what I want, sucker. I actually disagree. I think Gantz has as much mainstream appeal as it has because of the violence and breast size. I think the fact that it comes off as like, yeah, this is the edgy, cool, violent thing for, you know, people who want that, is exactly what's gotten so many eyes on it over the years. And yeah, it's not Naruto popular, but you know, I don't think its art style or its design sense or its premise is so instantly recognizable or accessible that it would have had that success without the violence on top of it. You can agree to disagree if you like. Now Assailant LF with $10. Rant on the difficulty of Elden Ring. I don't know if you beat it, but IMO, the last few areas and bosses are too hard, and this is from a New Game Plus 4 Sekiro enjoyer. Love you and your work. Hope you are doing well. Okay, so I haven't beaten Elden Ring, but I cannot... I've seen a lot of people talk about what they think is cheesy about the end game, in particular that Elden Ring prioritizes health bar length a lot more than some of the other games, where like, you know, you'll just get hit for so much fucking damage that like if you didn't really put a lot into health, then you're going to be fucked by the end game. I put a lot into health. I overlevel myself. I play slowly. I play in a way where I just comb over the map and do things over and over again. I would be shocked if I found it unbeatably hard, which is how I feel. Sekiro I could not beat. Sekiro is too hard for me. So in Elden Ring, it's not that I haven't tried. I haven't gotten that far into, like, I'm like halfway in. I'm at Renala. Maybe that's less than halfway. It's hard to say because again I've done so much random wandering around. I haven't played in a little while. But it, to me, if anything, the fact that it gives you so many tools and so much availability to like wander around and find something else to do, it's like every time I ever hit something that seemed like it was even too difficult, I would go off and just do another thing. And it's just so sprawling and massive that it's like, there was a period where like I ran up against a wall of like going in 6 different directions that all were too hard, and then I just, you know, went in a totally other direction and did something else. So yeah, it's that level of exploration that keeps it fun even when it's challenging, and also from getting crazy challenging. I would have to ask Bird his thoughts on the end game because he beat it. And Bird, keep in mind, beat it on a mouse and keyboard, never having played any From Software game before it. So he completely learned the mechanics from scratch, made like several characters just to experiment with. He, you know, eventually went online and like learned all the ways to get like lots of souls quickly, or what is it, runes in that game. You know, just he found ways to, I won't say cheese because it's all in the game on purpose, but like he figured out the shortcuts to make the game, you know, more accessible to yourself, and eventually got good and beat it. And so, you know, knowing that, and that he was able to do that within the first like couple of months of release, it's like, well, dang, if he could beat it, I, a seasoned Souls veteran, surely could beat Elden Ring. I call myself a seasoned Souls veteran, but I fucking suck at all the games. I just max out that stat and vitality, dog. So yeah, I actually I follow a guy called Donovan Young Crip Daddy on Twitter. I believe he beat Sekiro, even though he is like severely disabled, like somebody who's in a wheelchair at all times and doesn't have total function over their body. You just you find ways to make it work. You find good key bindings. You find different tactics in the game. The game has lots of different ways you can play it, especially with all the summons and shit. It's really just a matter of figuring out all the tools that you have at your disposal, and sometimes that can be really hard when when it takes so much exploration to find it all. I'm not trying to talk down to you either, because obviously as a New Game Plus 4 Sekiro enjoyer, you know how these games be, but it's just, I guess I'm always suspect when someone says the game is too hard, because I know there's so many things that can be done to like navigate that difficulty. Mike Hunt with Australian $2 says, Gantz gave me an existential crisis. Read it all. I've heard it's really good. You're not the first person to tell me that the Gantz manga is incredible. Lots and lots of people have said so. I know it gets deep. I know it's got parts where like guys fist fight with bears and shit. And there's dinosaurs. Even dinosaurs are here, and they have bows and arrows. And my sword is unbelievably dull. Anonymous says Tiggle Biddies. Cuta says, this game just never ends. There's always somewhere to go, lol. Yeah, that's true. I assume you're talking about Elden Ring. Sweet Lime Juice says, you didn't throw anything. I think you're dope. Keep it going. I don't know what you were referring to. Oh, through my chance at AniTube stardom down the toilet. I could have been a contender. Alright. More rant requests. More. I am the one, don't weigh a ton, don't need a gun to get respect up on the streets. Stevez with Australian $5 says, I remember your rant video about Demolition D Plus you made a while ago. Has your opinion changed at all since then, and do you still like his content? Honestly, it's been a long time since I've like gone and rewatched all Demolition D stuff, because he ain't made nothing in like 5 years on his main channel as far as I know. Honestly, I watched some of those videos so many times that I have them in my brain. Like, I can always just go back to like the free review where he's like, it's summertime and the living's easy. Join Swimsuit Boy and his friends, Swimsuits Boys. And like that's just gonna be in my head forever. Nothing's gonna make that go away. So yeah, Demo, very influential, lots of good quotes. The one where he's like, if I just ignore the bad parts, then everything's good, in the Aldino Zero review. I would say that both Demo and I, a lot of our best videos came from a place of frustration with the fact that like criticism wasn't as commonplace as like a form of media in the early 2010s. Like, you could find lots of like critical blogs and stuff on the internet, but most of it had no audience and no real way to find an audience and couldn't be a career for anybody. There were very few people who like self-published critiques that they could like sell on DVDs and stuff like that, or people like AVGN who were hired by Screw Attack or Yahtzee from The Escapist. But you didn't have just like this massive number of fucking people just putting up critical videos just for the sake of it online. So like back then there was just so much that hadn't been expressed. Like for instance, my video Turn Your Brain Off. The message of that is kind of similar to that Demolition D statement in that video, but both of us were just like so sick of this cultural idea that you were supposed to just not pay attention to the thing you're watching so that you'll enjoy it more. And like we're really just railing against that. And now like people just don't really say that shit anymore. Like you don't get Turn Your Brain Off type comments because now most people understand that like you can analyze pretty much any media you watch. You can get something deeper out of it, even if it's not necessarily like trying to be deep per se. And that like, you know, an active watching style can be fun and engaging. Like being critical doesn't have to ruin things for you or make you not enjoy it. So I just think a lot of what we were angry about and fighting about against the Tide back then, it worked. We did change the way that people looked at and talked about stuff. And so, like, some of the stuff that Demolition D said or even that I said back then probably comes off as comparably passé now to how it was at the time. Like, Demolition D's videos would have felt way more unique, way more revolutionary before tons of people copied them and before tons of people just followed the ethos forward. So, yeah, I probably should have mentioned him when I was talking about that AniTube history video. I know he gets like a longer segment in Gigix vid, and I do think he's probably the most beloved AniTuber, the one who you know, who had the most sense of how to seem cool while doing something as terminally lame as being an AniTuber. So yeah, I would say that like even if that content probably wouldn't like hit me now the way it did back then, it holds up in the sense that it was great and remains great, and you know, that greatness won't be removed by the fact that like other people have done similarly great things since. Anonymous says, I'm glad you're not an MB clone for what it's worth. I mean, like, again, I was first. Mother's Basement was a fan of my content, and I liked what he was doing, especially in the beginning with the What's in an OP series. My main issue with Mother's Basement is that he is a businessman first, and I should have been more like that. I probably should have worked with him more and about the business end of things, but I really was an artist first for you know, for the last 7 years of doing this type of content. So like you know, that was the main like disconnect we had, is like I'm trying to make something I want to make and then find a way to sell it, or like find something that is saleable that happens to be something I want to do. And Mother's Basement is like, I am looking for what I can talk about that will make me the most money this week. Smart. Good and good formula of like, you know, making sure every video is like a certain length and a certain style so that everyone knows what to expect, and that it has this very like, this is a YouTube video kind of feel to it. My stuff, sometimes you turn it on, you're not even sure where or fucking what you are anymore. Clone was a bad choice of word. No, it's fine. It's fine. But yeah, I get what you mean. Alright, I must continue sitting and seeing if anybody else wants to send rant requests, since I've been getting so many. I don't want to let a good thing die. Also, my video is still rendering. My big finale of Vlogust. Logusta. Thank you for answering my questions. I might be old-fashioned, but you and Demo are still my favorite AniTubers. Thank you so much. I don't know what AniTube has really become now. I do think, like I said, because of the fact that Demo and I were really kind of covering new ground of like frustrations or things that like lots of people were feeling but nobody had quite said yet, and now that all that has been said, it just doesn't really need to be restated. You know, it's like there's lots of like just broad points that you can make about anime. Like, for instance, my mind always goes back to this video I did called Why There Is So Much High School Anime. Like, it's just something like, obviously everyone must have thought of, right? Like if you get into anime and you realize that there's just like an fucking endless trove, like hundreds and hundreds of shows that are set in high school or have like that is the main focus of the plot. And it's not true of any other film medium, you know, or from any other country. Like there's just nothing else that is so high school centric as anime tends to be. And so everyone's going to notice that. Everyone's going to get curious about it. So if I make a video about it, it should appeal to practically all anime fans. And it wasn't even that it was like some like huge revelation. It was just me like coming up with all the reasons I could think of why that might be the case and proposing them so that people might have more perspective on this thing that, you know, is in the back of everybody's mind as like a why. Why is this a thing? Why is this mysterious thing that is so obvious? It's like staring you in the face. Man, anime really is high school centric, but fucking why? I can only make a video like that one time. I cannot make up all over again why there are so many high school anime. There are not so many other thing anime. There are just so many high school anime. And even if there's plenty of sports anime, but the reason is obvious. Sports narratives are interesting. You know, like the only one that wasn't obvious is like, why are there so many high school anime? So, you know, I came up with reasons. Once someone has said that, there's nothing to be said about it again. There's not somebody, someone else could make their own take with their own explanation, but I covered so much ground in that video. So, like, I do think that a lot of early AniTube and a lot of my videos and demos videos from around that era were mostly like, I've noticed this thing about anime, or I've noticed that this anime represents this thing about anime really well. Like, the Asterisk War Sucks to me was the ultimate example of the, like, just fucking shit tier light novel adaptation being cranked out by A1 Pictures. And there were, like, tons of anime I could have chosen to be the one, but that one was the figurehead representative of it. And then once I had done that, it's like, well, I'm not going to now apply that same logic to another show that's exactly the same. I'll just end up saying all the same things. So, like, it came to a point where when you've made all the broad general realization type posts about anime, now you have to go diving into the history or the technical aspects or like something else, some other new ground of a way to talk about it. And the only way you can really go down those avenues is to know enough about those things to have something to say. So, you know, when someone like Caribou-kun does like an in-depth historical examination of a show that not that many people know about, that's great and it's really cool. It's hard to replicate, and it's not as broadly accessible as just a show, like, you know, just talking about a broad concept about anime that everyone can recognize. So, like, where AniTube is now, it's a lot more, like, focused on individual shows or small groupings or, like, weird, like, Hazel is really good at finding, like, really bizarre logic for why these shows are connected that she's talking about, and she'll bring together, like, all these different you know, like basically more of like a train of thought that she's following than like a I won't say it's not journalistic because it is, but it's very like explorative as opposed to, you know, assuming that everyone has already had this thought about anime or is interested in this anime. She's like, take a journey with me through anime, you know, and here's what the thought is that's guiding us. I like that. I think that's the most fun way to do anime content now, is to make it like an excursion we're taking together, as opposed to like, oh, I went out and I got all the information and I brought it back and I'm presenting it to you. She's like, let's go get the information together, even though technically she did it all by herself and is just giving it to you in like a packaged form. But the way the video is edited is like, it endears you to what is fun about researching anime, what is fun about going down these rabbit holes and like being obsessed with these obscure pieces of media, as opposed to treating it like the information is in itself important or relevant. You know, like, again, to me the most important videos I've done were things like, you know, is there meaning in subverting shonen tropes? Like, that's a video where I'm just like trying to end an argument forever. And for myself, I did. Like, I never have to think about it or worry about it again. I said the thing, it's out there, and now I never have to talk about subversion of shonen tropes again. And like, if a new show came out and the most interesting thing about it was something that like connected it to that video, like I wouldn't be able to talk about that new show. I would just be like, I already talked about this in that broad point video. So yeah, I think that's kind of why AniTube has evolved, why it has continued changing, why certain styles have kind of like dwindled, and why like the new wave to me really is like, you have to make people care about something they just never would, and like not by way of convincing them to go watch it, just by like through the storytelling of your video bring people anime, as opposed to like suggesting that like they should have already seen it or should go see it. You're just like, no, I'm just gonna give you the experience. Like, that's where I think anime YouTube content survives best currently, what little there is. Mike Hunt with $5 Australian says, I hope you don't spend much thought about what may have been. This is your life now. What you have is good, and you don't know what how it may have been worse. That's true. I really don't spend much thought about what may have been. I mostly bring it up during videos because of the fact that my audience brings up that kind of stuff a lot. That there's lots of people who are themselves hung up in various parts of my past, and when I try to move on without acknowledging that kind of stuff, it can become controversial. Like, there's people who find it weird if I don't bring it up, if I don't express like some level of regrets or some level of like, you know, acknowledgement for the fact that I could have done better. Especially to people who have like an emotional or financial investment in me. Like, if you've always been like, if you really were like captivated with what I was doing, and then that like changed in some way and it's never been the same for you, like, I understand the feelings that would have driven you away, and how I can say, oh man, I wish I hadn't driven you away, because I could have just done this and you'd still be here, or I could have just, you know, like, it's more that kind of, aw, like, I wish I hadn't done this thing and scared these people away, more so than like, oh man, I wish my life was different, you know. I made the choices I've made all along with intent and purpose, and even if, you know, the results didn't always match the intent, it doesn't mean that that I think I necessarily made the wrong choice. There's a few places where I can definitely say if I had done this different, the results would have been catastrophically different, but I don't know what I would have done with that. I don't know what it would have led to. I can't predict any of that. So yeah, I don't like hypotheticals, so I don't spend that much time thinking about that kind of universe. Steve is with Australian $5 says, would you consider Trash Taste to be the new wave of AniTube? Why do you think they are so successful? I would say Trash Taste doesn't seem to be an anime podcast. I hear they don't really watch anime or talk about anime that much. I've never really listened to it, so I can't be like too, you know, I'm not like on top of it. I don't know where they're at right now. Why do I think it's so successful? Because they took the two biggest anime YouTubers and put them together with another handsome guy and made a show out of it. A lot of it really is, you know, Joey, the anime man, is an incredibly hardworking person who everybody respects, who's met him, who happens to also be really handsome and really successful and personable as just like a guy people want to watch. So he was already massively huge just by himself. You combine him as the biggest anime YouTuber with the other biggest anime YouTuber, Gigak, who is also pretty good looking, who also, you know, like, both of them have like a deeply ingrained presence in the sphere. People know who they are, excited to see them. They have confidence. They are good on camera. I still don't remember the other dude's name, who's the third guy on there. But like, you know, they've got a good set. They've got good energy. And yeah, again, like, they were already successful, so it just makes sense to me that audience would be the way it is. But what they quickly grasped is that like anime fans broadly are not anime fans. Anime is an aesthetic. It's like more so like a cultural touch point than it is like an active, like I think there's more people who like think about the fact that they are an anime fan than they do like watch anime, or they express anime fandom by way of like going into stores at the mall that have anime products and maybe looking at or buying them or thinking about them or talking about how cool those shows are. But like, you know, I think that if you try to have a conversation with someone like that about the individual shows that they watch, it's going to be really difficult, especially because most people interpret art in completely different ways. So, like, it makes sense to me that the podcast would be more of a broad cultural, like, what do people who call themselves anime fans really like and really want to hear about? That's the question that they're asking and answering, that's making them successful, I think. Anonymous with $2 says, do you think Uzumaki on Toonami is ever coming out? I have no idea. I don't know what's going on with that. It was like ready to go, I think, pre-pandemic or something, and then it just kind of disappeared. I wouldn't be surprised if it's like one dude animating the whole thing or something, because I know the director, it's the guy who did Flowers of Evil and Mushishi, and he did all kinds of great stuff. And I saw a panel with him at Otakon a few years back that was kind of mind-blowing, because he's done all kinds of really odd work throughout the industry. And he talked about like basically animating the entirety of Sexy Commando Gaiden like single-handedly. So I think that whatever's holding up Uzumaki is probably that guy specifically can't work on it temporarily or something, and that's holding it up. It's hard for me to say. I don't know if or when it will actually happen. Mike Hunt with Australian $5 says, former $1 Million Extreme member Charles Carroll has a great video screaming about moving on. That's in the past. You do what you want. I have not seen that one, but I will check it out. Yeah, I'm not somebody who spends a lot of time thinking about the past. Sometimes in my dreams, I dream about things that my mind's trying to move on from, but like I am very present focused. I don't spend much time thinking about the future either. I'm very much like, what am I doing right now? What do I need to be doing right now? How can I improve right now? So yeah, I tend not to go too far into the past or future. I've just I've made $100 in super chat revenue, so I'm starting to feel like I'm starting to feel gratified by this here stream. I don't know how much longer I can keep going for y'all. My video is still rendering. I don't know why it's taking so long to render. The computer took a long time for the last render as well, so it might just be that. But at some point before I pass out, my final video will make a premiere, final vlogist vlog. But until then, I'm going to keep looking at this chat and see if anybody makes a last minute squeeze in. Mike Hunt has already made so many super chats. I can't even suggest that he does another one. Anonymous says, I saw a vid the other day. Apparently Junji Ito has a Netflix project in the works currently as well. Hopefully it's better than last time. Yeah, hopefully. Steve Ez with Australian $5. Can you elaborate on Trash Taste audience a bit more? Do you think there's a big overlap with your audience, or are they mostly targeting normies? I don't have an audience. That's the issue here. My audience is a few thousand people. I think it's 100% crossover with Trash Taste. So when you look at, if you go into like my data, the biggest sources of views I get are from Mother's Basement, Trash Taste, and like Super Eye Patch Wolf. Like the closest content to mine on the internet, especially the anime content, is that. But I think if Trash Taste had existed when I was at the height of what I was doing on AniTube, there would have been a ton of crossover in our audiences. I think as it is now, again, I can't even I don't have enough audience to draw like a comparison like that. Like I am sure most of my audience either knows about or has watched that show. If they don't like it, it's specifically like if somebody likes me and doesn't like that, it's specifically because I am so much more underground and so different, and you can't relate to it because you think it's normie. I wouldn't necessarily consider it normie. I think it's well, maybe that's not true. But yeah, I don't know. I think their audience is just people who like anime generally. Like, it's not people who are obsessed with watching every anime they can get a hold of and, like, learning all the fucking history about it and having a conversation ready to go about it, you know? LastBand17 with £5 said, there are a few anime on your MAL that you've seen but not rated. Do you still plan on going back to those shows in the future to give them a rating? Yeah, so at some point with my MAL, I want to say in like 2014 probably, around when I started my YouTube channel, I deleted all the scores I had on there because it had been so long since I'd been watching anime actively that I didn't feel like I would have the same taste or give the same scores to anything. So I basically just canned all the scores and started fresh with anything I watched from that point forward. So most of the stuff that I've given scores to is stuff that I have rewatched or have watched just in the time since, having replaced all my scores. But some of them I probably will revisit and give a rating. Some of them maybe never. I don't know all specifically of what shows have no rating, but I would assume it's probably like half of the shows I've finished. Maybe less. I don't know. It's been a long time and I've rated a lot of things. I don't know how seriously any of my scores should be taken at this point, or even my scoring system as declared on MAL at this point. There's definitely a few shows that I've seen episodes of that I haven't marked yet because I just haven't been using it. I haven't been using my anime list recently. So I also tend to rewatch like for Anime Alphabet, a lot of the shows I've watched have been shows I've already seen before, so like it looks like I'm way less active watching anime because I'm rewatching stuff, and I don't like doing the whole marking rewatching on your MAL because it's just a pain. But yeah. Alright, I'm going to actually go take a pee and come back, and if there's not any super chats, rant requests when I get back, I'm ending the stream. What? Oh. Well, never mind. Someone's in the bathroom, but in a minute I'm going to do that. Junji Ito. I should read more Junji Ito manga. I'm kind of on a horror kick right now, and manga is a good way to get horror in. Robert Sora with €2 says, what's the next few Anime Alphabet gonna be? I'm just gonna keep that a secret. I've got some information about Anime Alphabet coming out in my big announcement video that's currently rendering. So I don't want to say too much about it, but I mean, the next one is supposed to be Mobile Suit Gundam, is for M. So, but beyond that, you don't get to know. I'm sorry. Just admitted my rant in the Patreon messages. Oh boy. Let's go check that out. I wonder if this is for... Does this count as a September rant or for the next month? No. Okay. Yeah, okay. You didn't have one, so this will count as an August rant for you. Do you think the Western anime audience can have any meaningful impact on a show's success / whether it gets a sequel? Definitely. I mean, historically it has. Most directly with the Big O. Sort of famously, the Big O, it aired on Toonami. The people who I guess it was just like Toonami itself, they just really liked the show or something, and they helped to fund the second season. So the second season has this very this tinge of like trying to appeal to more Western sensibilities with the way they like animated mouths and stuff. It's interesting. I don't know why they would change it between seasons when it was already working the first time, but in any case, that's like the most cited example of like a direct this was successful in the West, so they made another one. And then like that was around the time like when anime was really blowing up in the early 2000s was when it seemed like the West had the most influence, especially because there were lots of like Western productions hiring anime studios. So you had stuff like the Kill Bill segment or the Animatrix, where these these studios are being brought on to like these big name Western shows that brought more attention to anime in a general way. Cowboy Bebop being a huge success didn't lead to like a sequel or anything. It did eventually lead to a live action adaptation. We've got a few of those as a result of shows being popular in the West. But it's very rare, I think, that an anime is so successful outside of Japan that it causes like them to change the way they do things, because usually it's also that popular in Japan. Like Demon Slayer is a good example. That is the most popular anime worldwide in recent years. But nothing about the way it's successful in America is unique to the way it was successful in Japan. It was already a massive smash hit over there. So, like, they don't have to change anything to make it appeal more to Westerners. It's already a massive hit. It's already going to do as well overseas as it's going to do. It would be different if it was like something that didn't succeed in Japan and only succeeded in the West. And we've seen very little of that. So, I just think there hasn't been like enough opportunities for the West to like reinvigorate something that was dying. And part of that is that it costs so much extra money even to like make something for like a global audience, Devilman Crybaby would be a good example. That show was made clearly for a worldwide audience. It was made for Netflix. They knew it was going to be all over the world, but like the dub is kind of like haphazard, and it just feels like they couldn't spend the amount of like money on making it like accessible and marketable to Westerners that would have caused it to have such an impact here that it would like change the way anything is done. I don't know. I definitely think that that outside of Japan markets have more of an impact now in the streaming era, because like more shows, like when anime gets made for Netflix, it tends to be like the more violent, over the top, fetishistic type stuff that Netflix encourages and that Japanese television doesn't as much. So that kind of stuff probably will hit more overseas, but it's not because that stuff wouldn't hit in Japan. I think it has an effect. I just don't think it has such an effect that it changes the way that anime is made or marketed all that heavily. Robert Sora with €2 says, how is One Piece live action going to end up? I hope it ends up good. At least it's like Japanese, I think. It looks, the actors look right. The boat looks right. I can't imagine how One Piece is supposed to work in live action. I know there's been like some kind of previous like project like supposing it, but I don't know. I can't imagine a One Piece live action actually being good. It just doesn't seem like it should be possible. Mike Hunt with $2 Australian. What's the best Animatrix and why is it world record? Do you remember that one being pretty sick? I haven't actually watched the Animatrix since like it came out in 2003, so I'm amazed there's any images from it that are in my head at all. The whole, robot uprising, like the backstory one that explains how the Matrix was made, was pretty sick. I had remembered liking like Detective Story the most at the time, but that was probably just because I was such a big Cowboy Bebop fan. And I don't remember. I'd have to rewatch the Animatrix to give you like a real answer on that. So, yeah, I don't have anything better. Okay. Okay, I've hit the end again. So once more, I'm going to sit here for a minute, see if anybody gives me another super chat, rant request, because I love money. Oh yeah, I'm going to go to the bathroom. I'm going to go pee, and then see what happens. Alright. I went to the bathroom and I came back, and there's not a new super chat, so that's it. We're going to end this stream. I'm going to let y'all know, within a few hours, the last episode of Vlogus is going to come out, and it's going to be a doozy. It's going to blow your minds to shit. It's going to blow your shit to minds. Whoa. How does that even work? Thanks for coming out again, everybody. Thanks for all the super chat donations and to all the patrons. Remember, I'll be doing a Patreon rant request live stream every single month to answer all of the Patreon rant requests and the ones that I get live. All right, everybody. Good night. Good morning. Goodbye.